Oh, I should have cut my mustache before this. Howdy, everybody. This is Chris Explains World War II in the Pacific off the top of my head. Um, I did make this a while ago, but not for this video. Just because I had a globe and markers and I wanted to learn more about this. So World War II didn't just happen, and it's two or three countries fighting the Allies, right? So it's Italy and Japan and Germany. Italy and Germany worked really tight with each other. And, Germany had this idea that they're the supreme race and that all Asiatic peoples are inferior. And they also teamed up with these Asiatic people, the Japanese. Um, World War II is basically a bunch of newly formed countries that are jealous of the Europeans that already have their empire. And they want to take they didn't agree to all of the treaties that carved up the world without them, and so they want to take uh, the stuff. They wanted their own empire now, and they're going to fight the old empires for it. So Italy, Germany, and Japan aren't major players until the 1860s, 1870s. Japan is opened; it was closed. It was not available. It was literally closed. Uh, for There's three people waiting in that stream, and they're not watching this video because I don't know how to do YouTube. It's messing with me. But so they want to be a country. They want to be empires. That's right. Japan is closed. They have, they have the port of Nagasaki open to the world, mostly Dutch people. But Dutch people know a lot of stuff. So they're getting some information from Dutch people. And they're keeping little teeny tiny tabs on China just to make sure, like, there's nothing we need to watch out for. And they see the Opium War happen. The Opium War is Great Britain has been allowed to trade in China because China needs silver, because that's the only thing that they are allowed to pay taxes in, and it's something that China doesn't have a ton of. And you know what they say? Nothing goes together like silverware in China. That's a dumb joke I love to keep saying. But so the Opium War happens, and it's Great Britain, which has steamships and all kinds of crazy stuff, and they go and they fight the Qing dynasty, which is the most powerful country on Earth. It looks like, in terms of the number of population controlled, like, absolutely they're the most powerful country on Earth. But their navy, the Manchus who rule it are not familiar with naval warfare. They conquered China through land warfare, and their navy is a bunch of individual state-based coast guards. So the British, who have the greatest navy the world has ever known, using steamships, a technology they came up with 40 years ago, which means you can angle anywhere you want to go. You don't have to worry about the wind. And when you're aiming cannons, it makes a big difference. They also have the best cannons that anyone has in the world. And so they mopped the floor with the Qing dynasty. And instead of just being able to trade in Canton, which is right here, they can now trade in 5 wonderful treaty ports. And Japan takes notice of this, and they say, "Oh wow, these stinky foreign white people with all the hair growing off their face, they can do boats really good, and we can't because we've been closed for 200 years." And they just take a note of that, and then the United States of America, during Fillmore's presidency, right before Lincoln, sends over Commodore Perry to Yokohama Harbor, and with a bunch of boats with guns, from that Better YouTube video, and they park the boats in the harbor and they go, "Hey, we would like to trade with you guys." The same deal that just what Great Britain wanted with China. That's all we want with you. Nothing crazy. We'll come back in a year. Say yes. And the Japanese, they agree to say yes, but then they have a civil war about it. And the civil war is decided when the Emperor Meiji, sides with the rebel forces. The government forces um, were headed by the shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate. The shogun is usually the person who's in charge of Japan. It's usually some dictator who lets there be an emperor because he's very nice. And the emperor is like, very important, but writing poetry and sort of the best guy around, and not somebody who bothered with day-to-day politics, you know. So you leave the emperor out of it, but the emperor sides with the rebels and takes complete power, and so that's called the Meiji Restoration, and it's named after Emperor Meiji. He had a different name when he was alive, but you're supposed to use the temple names after they're dead, which we do with everybody except for Hirohito, because I'm not. What, am I supposed to call him Reiwa or something? Um. Anyway, so Meiji takes over, and he sends Japanese people all over the world to take pictures. Like literally, he sends them out with, you know, cameras and notepads, and just like, hey, see what everybody's up to, and see if we can do it too. And so they go all over, and they figure out, they see like, oh, there's this place called America, and they pick their own leaders, not from royalty, just from whoever's around and whoever people like. That's a crazy idea. And then they don't have an emperor, so it doesn't really apply to us. But then they see Germany, and they go, oh wow, these guys are really really good at factories, and they're just they have but they have this electors of Hanover, and I don't know what that is. And then they see Great Britain, and they go, oh, they have a monarch, they have a global empire. They're an island hanging off the continent of Eurasia. We're an island hanging off the continent of Eurasia. They have a monarch. We have a monarch. They have a parliament. Let's have a diet. They don't use the word parliament. I don't know, because of the RL combination. I don't know. But they don't have a parliament. They call it a diet. And they it's not a real parliament. It's not like um, it's not like they're getting things actually accomplished. It's Emperor Meiji rubber stamp or doing everything, because he's the one who took control after the rebels rebelled, which is what they're mostly going to do. And so he's doing everything, and then the diet is a bunch of noblemen who get to rubber stamp it, and they go, sure, yeah, whatever you say, man. And they don't know. They're just trying to copy as much stuff from Great Britain because they want to be powerful, and they recognize that Great Britain is by far the most powerful country on the face of the earth. And uh, that whole time, they're copying machines. They're copying manufacturing techniques, and they want to bring enough of the world in that they can keep it with them, but not so much of the world that they're not Japanese anymore. Like the whole Meiji era project is like, let's bring enough of the world in that if we get invaded, we could repel them, and we wouldn't be subject to the same kind of humiliation as China. China during this time period is being led by uh, Empress Dowager Cixi, one of the worst people to ever run a country. Just terrible. Just like, just bad at being emperor. And I mean, some like the just ruins the place. Doesn't let anybody build a railroad because they're too loud. They go to her and they say, "Hey, we need to build a railroad, and we have the kind of people who build railroads already here. We don't have to ship them in from anywhere." And she's like, "Oh, what's a railroad? It's like a steam, and carries a bunch of stuff all in a row." And it goes, "Whoo whoo." They're like, "Oh, that sounds loud." And they're like, "Yeah, I guess." Goes, "Yeah, probably wake up my ancestors. No go." Like, what are you talking about, man? So she doesn't let them build a railroad. They have to come all the way over here to build ours for us. Thank you. And so Japan is doing the opposite. They're like, let's bring as much of the world in, and they eventually fight over Korea with China and the what's called the Sino-Japanese War, the first Sino-Japanese War, and everyone's like, okay, well, China's not doing good, but clearly, like, that's who our money's on. Like, we're not going to bet on Japan. They just opened like 30 years ago, but they win. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, how'd they win? You know, how do you, that's insane. But I mean, I guess they're the main Asian power. They're the best of the Asians. We're all Europeans here, so they're not going to be better than us, but they're certainly the best of the Asians. Good for them, everyone says. And they get invited to take out chunks of China. Like in 1900, there's this thing called the Boxer Rebellion. And all the major powers of the world gang up on. So China has been going down and down and down and down and downhill. And they've noticed that the number of white people and Europeans have been going up. And so they go, okay, the Europeans are bringing the bad stuff. So let's just secretly learn Kung Fu and beat all of the Europeans up, which is it's a pretty good strategy, except for that they tattle to their governments who bring their navies and shell everybody to pieces. And it takes about 55 days. The rebels assume that the government is going to go against them, the Qing dynasty. They assume that they're going to go against them because you're not allowed to learn Kung Fu. But Empress Dowager Cixi decides to side with them because she's dumb and literally bad at her job. Oh my gosh. I can't say enough negative things about Empress Dowager Cixi. But the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Italy, who just asked for a chunk of China without like declaring war on them. How embarrassing, And they hack a Russian couple to death in this, and they apologize for it. And they go, "Sorry, we thought they were French," because China considered the Russians to be a different kind of European than everybody else, because they had a land border. Anyway, Japan gets invited into that, and they send their army in to quash the Boxer Rebellion and go, "Hey, we're one of the adult countries now, and you knock it off, China." And China does not like that about Japan suddenly having this attitude. Like, Japan didn't come up with its own writing system. It just took Chinese writing system. Like, of course, China's look at the size of them. Which one of those is the main country in Asia? The couple of islands? The couple islands over here? Or oh man, or the big old chunk right here. You know? Who do you think the Japanese got the idea of having an emperor from? You think they came up with themselves? No, they heard about these guys doing it, and they didn't even really have one because it was just a bunch of different. Anyway, so it's 1900, and it's the end of the long 19th century, everything's, oh wow, there's so much science and technology, and everyone's voting, and this is so great. Things are just progressing up and up and up, and there'll never be another big bad problem again. we have all these countries, and they have this cool idea called nationalism, and that'll probably be fine. The French gave it to everybody 100 years ago, and now Germany's getting to try it out, and Italy's getting to try it out, and the people in Austro-Hungary are hearing about it, and the Austro-Hungarians are like, "No, you guys do not get to try it out." Um, and world, and so then the Japanese, they fight a war against Russia. You know, the biggest country on Earth, huge, gigantic Russia, which includes Finland at this point. And you would think, being tiny Japan, who has just now figured out, you know, how to do a navy, that they would not win against the largest country on Earth with territory from the Arctic Circle down to India, you know. But no, they figure out exactly how to win against Russia, and they get the Americans to broker the peace, and Teddy Roosevelt does it. And you know who's there? Is Douglas MacArthur, witnessing next to, on the same side as the Japanese. And he's there taking notes as a young lad, like, ooh, these guys are serious, you know? And so he gets he's one of the most educated in Japanese culture, Westerners, that there is at the time. And he's like 19. And then he goes off to West Point. He's with his dad, Arthur MacArthur, which is a crazy name. And what else do we have here? Sino-Japanese War, Russo-Japanese War. Okay. Oh, yeah. Then there's this cool thing called World War I happens. And World War I is... it's this... Everyone wants to have a war because everyone thinks that a war is a good idea because everyone's not quite sure. They want something to make their country modernize or gel together or something, or get a little bit more territory. And you know, there's all these new countries that are trying out, you know, being a country and fighting in the war. And it turns out that exploding shells and machine guns make a lot of difference, and that this is a horrible industrial warfare that just kills all kinds of people. And there's no way to stop it, and they can't figure out how to stop it. And the Germans, who are fighting on two fronts the whole time, are doing like surprisingly really good. And that's weird because they're not even supposed to be a country. Nobody, like Prussia's been a country, but all of Germany, you know, and they're doing really well, but also starving because Germany doesn't have any resources, you know, and it's in the middle and it can be blockaded by Great Britain, who has the biggest navy on Earth. And the whole reason this war broke out is because one of the reasons is Great Britain and Germany have been stockpiling having navies. And to see whose is the bigger one. Do the navies ever fight? No, they don't ever fight. And they end up calling Woodrow Wilson, whose main thing was, hey, guess what, guys? I'm running for re-election in 1916. You're welcome for not getting us into war. And then in 1917, they're like, please, America, we're Europe and we can't do anything. Could you guys do history for us? And we go, okay, we'll do history for you guys. And we win World War I all by ourselves. No, but we really help. The manpower over there, using French tanks and all kinds of stuff. We overrun the Germans on the one side, and the Russians have lost. The Russians have lost to the Germans and declared at the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk that the Germans have won World War I. And World War I, has killed 20 million people. And you might ask yourself, why? That's a great question. People don't like that everyone's died, but they would like it to be for something. So and Germany, it gets an advance close enough to its borders that the workers start revolting, and the workers in the biggest country on earth, Russia, with who is not yet quite out of the war exactly, um, they have just revolted and formed a communist party, and that's where they take everybody's house and move it around. And people don't like that because they already know where they live, or they already know where their landlord lives. And there's some people in Germany who want there to be a big socialist revolution because Germany's where socialism is supposed to happen. Karl Marx was from Germany, and he was like, well, obviously this is something that's really more of a Germany thing. It's like once you get to be really good at being a capitalist, then you're going to be a socialist, and then you're going to be a communist, and that's never happened. It's only been people who've been in feudal countries or colonized countries that where none of them own the land anyway, that they're fine with redistributing the land. Once you have petit bourgeois, like, my mom owns a house. She's not going to support communism. My mom works writing medical policy for the state of Florida. She's not. She's pretty invested in the status quo, and a lot of people in America are. That's why we're not going to have a socialist revolution. But if all you have to do, if it's just a couple thousand landlords you got to get rid of, oh yeah, right for socialism. And with colonization, a couple thousand landlords who don't even live here, don't look like you, treat you like trash, and don't speak your language and make you speak their language. Yeah, that's a great reason to reorganize all the stuff. So so Germany gives up, and they say, okay, we just started to fall apart, and we want to get as good a peace as we can now, because we don't want to get a worse peace, and this war has already lasted long enough. And so, what is World War One about? Well, I think if it's about anything, it's that Austro-Hungarian is a pretty poor theme for an empire. What do you mean Austro-Hungarian? Like half Austrian, half Hungarian? Okay, is that the only people there? No, there's 17 more kinds of people there. Well, yeah, and they've just been exposed to nationalism, and so they all get to break up into their separate pieces, like Austria and the Czech Republic and or the Czechoslovakia and all these different fragments, and Poland and they decided there's going to be a Poland. That's one of the things that World War One was about, is we need there to be a Poland. That way, Russia and Germany don't just fight each other, because Russia had previously annexed all of Poland, and so they shared a border with Prussia, which is this part of Germany that's now Poland. And Woodrow Wilson goes over there, and he goes, this war was about, you guys want democracy. And everyone in Europe was like, that sounds fine. That's what the war was about. Oh, also no more wars. And he goes, also no more wars. Let's have a club called the Don't Have Any More Wars Club. And everyone goes, okay, sure. That's another thing this war was about, forming the Don't Have Any More Wars Club. The Don't Have Any More Wars Club is called the League of Nations. And everybody's in it, except Woodrow Wilson forgot to ask his parents if he could join. So he actually does not join. I don't like the way that's been playing on right now. Oh, I don't like that either. All right. So Woodrow Wilson's parents, the Senate, who have to ratify things like that, they say no. And why were you going over to Europe and telling people that you're allowed to do stuff like that when you had to ask us first? And he's like, it's the Senate. Come on. There's about to be no more wars. I promise. And they're like, well, it seems like getting involved in the first place was the problem. What, are we supposed to just be the global world police and monitor every ocean on Earth to make sure there's no change in territory so that we can, create a global system of prosperity in which the the global life expectancy hits the mid 60s by the dawn of the 21st century. And Woodrow Wilson goes, I don't know, maybe. And another thing that World War II is supposed to be about is the Japanese participation in World War II or World War One, it's all right here. Germany took a bunch of islands and then they took them because they were not being guarded. So Japan, technically, did World War One and they were on the right side of it. They were on the good guy side. Yay! So they were over in Paris, right over here. Oh, this is weird because I have to look over there. They were in Paris, and they were like, I think that World War One was about that everybody is equal regardless of race. And Woodrow Wilson's like, what? No, that's not what World War One was about. And they're like, really? What if everybody is equal regardless of race? And Woodrow Wilson's like, no. Have you seen this new movie? It's great. It's called Birth of a Nation. It's my favorite movie. I love watching it in the White House, which he did. Watch it all the time. He's trying to make. Look, you can only be so woke if it's 1918. And so the Japanese go, this is dumb. I don't even like this. But they're given a bunch of the stuff. They're given all of Germany's possessions and all of the Axis possessions in the Far East. So they go, okay, you can take some of that stuff. That's fine. And the Chinese are like, isn't World War One about no more colonialism? And everyone's like, no, I don't think that's what World War One is about. Like, it's a real complicated issue, I guess. So everyone goes home and everyone's sad about World War One, except for the Americans. The Americans have leased debt to everybody, and since America was strategically located not in Europe, they didn't get bombed to pieces. And unfortunately, Europe was in Europe, right in the smack dab middle of it, so it did get bombed and destroyed and all kinds of stuff to pieces. So Europe is putting itself back together with loans from the Americans, and Great Britain still thinks it's the most important country on the face of the earth because it's got a lot of territory, and it's actually America, but nobody knows and nobody cares yet. And the Soviet Union, there's like a World War One brief sequel where everybody decides to invade the Soviet Union, and it lasts until 1922. Like, there's all these like disaffected soldiers that just go over to fight the communists, and they don't want the same things or coordinate with each other. And the Soviets, Lenin and Trotsky and Stalin, they decided, hey, I've got this new idea for government, and it's everybody listens to me in my club, and we're not just gonna do votes on everything, okay? We're gonna have me and my club do it, and we're gonna work it out in our club, and that's gonna be the government, and that's called Leninism. And they decide to do the new economic policy and all kinds of stuff. Eventually they get a little sort of colony in Mongolia right here, which splits off from China, which should be the one controlling Mongolia, because the Qing dynasty used to control Mongolia, but the Qing dynasty is falling apart. Speaking of, okay, so that's World War One, and everybody taxes Germany. This is not a video about Germany. Let's go back to the Qing dynasty. The last emperor of the Qing dynasty is named Henry Puyi, and he gets deposed. He assumes he's born in 1906, I think, and he assumes power sort of in 1908, I believe, and he cries during his coronation because he is two. It's very normal to cry for two. And that's like, oh, this is a big problem. He only did one thing significant before he got deposed because he was 2 and then 4. when he's 4 or 5 or however old, it's 1911, and there's a rebellion in Guangdong province, I think, led by Sun Yat-sen. You know, the guy who founded the Republic of China. How crazy is it to be named Sun Yat-sen and found the Republic of China? That's like the guy who founded America being named 50 Stars Yat-sen. Huh? That's kind of funny. Because of the flag. The Republic of China flag has a sun on it. Anyway, catch up, kids. So this is so he I don't know if you've ever been a deposed monarch of the Qing dynasty, but one of the things you can do is be in your house and wear fancy clothes, and that's actually kind of all of the things you can do. Uh, there's a regent in charge of you, and there's a bunch of eunuchs who are guys who have permanently had their Johnson and Johnson and Johnson and Johnson severed off their body. They have weird, strange, long limbs about it, and you can't get that back. And so, how many other jobs are you qualified to do if you're a eunuch? You know? So they're all pretty invested in the idea of, okay, we're going to keep having an empire, and it's going to be, and we're going to keep having an imperial city, and we're going to keep stealing from the emperor. And the emperor, Puyi, who is trapped in his house because if he goes somewhere else, they're going to fire all the eunuchs. And so they kind of like pressure him into just staying there. He's like, I want to ride a bicycle. And everyone's like, you're not allowed to ride a bicycle. He's like, I'm the emperor. He's like, yeah, exactly. Don't ride a bike. You've got a big gown on with a dragon on it. How are you supposed to fit that over a bike? He's like, can't I wear pants? And they're like, pants? You know. They won't let him do nothing. They won't let my man Puyi do nothing. He gets a BB gun. He cocks it a bunch of times and he shoots it at various eunuchs. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. And the woman who nursed him, his mother is addicted to opium. The woman who nursed him, which is not his mother, is like, imagine if someone shot me with the BB gun. Wouldn't you feel bad about that? And he's like, I would have them killed. And she's like, but in this situation, you're the one that's doing the bad. And he's like, oh, okay. The gun is the problem. So then he makes a big sandwich with BBs in it, and he feeds it to these eunuchs, and he's hearing the sound of their teeth crack on the metal BBs. And he's like, ha, 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 just normal childhood stuff. And the woman who's nursed him is like, but don't you understand that would hurt my teeth, right? And he's like, what is this lady always talking about herself for? He's not like getting this empathy thing, but he figures it out. Not to spoil the story. But so the deal that Sun Yat-sen makes is that because nobody wants a big giant civil war. They just had a big giant civil war called the Taiping Rebellion. My favorite conflict in human history. It's so interesting. They just had one, and it destroyed everything. And people were selling human meat in grocery stores. It went really bad. It went crazy bad, and so everyone's like, "Let's not have a big giant civil war. We don't need to have one of those." So how about instead of a big giant civil war, we'll do anything else? And so the guy who's in charge of the main army, the Beiyang army, whose name is Yuan Shikai, he brokers a deal. He says, hey, listen, I will take my army over to the Republic and depose the emperor, but I have to be the president. And Sun Yat-sen, who is currently the president and who everybody likes, American propaganda at the time called him the George Washington of China, meaning World War II. World War II American propaganda called him the George Washington of China. He was like, all right, you can be president, but yeah, you have to make the kid quit. And so they make the kid quit, which is easy because he's a child and you can just hold him down, And so Now China's like a new country, and Mao Zedong cuts his queue off because everyone in China has to wear this long ponytail and shaved head at the top of their head. And nobody gets a choice. If somebody's mowing the grass near me, this better not affect me in any way. Don't you know I'm explaining World War II? Okay, I'm just going to talk over it in a really uh, unprofessional sort of way. That sucks. There's not that much grass. Oh my god, that sucks so bad. So, Sanya Wanshikai gets this cool idea. He goes, "Hey, what if I'm the emperor now?" And everyone hates it, and they make him quit 80 days later. And so, because now no one's in charge, uh, all of the provinces split off into some warlord or other. And theoretically, the Beijing government has control, but no, they don't. And that's just what they're doing. For the only people with any sense on their shoulders are the nationalists and the communists. They're the only ones who are not like just out. They have some kind of values, like democracy, modernization, sharing. It's a value, and they're part of the same organization anyway. They're just like this. And then this guy, Chiang Kai-shek, he gets handed control of the Kuomintang. Kuomintang means nationalist party, and it's actually Chinese is really like it's made of simple parts. So Kuomintang, Guo is nation, Min is people, nation people, nationalists. Isn't that cool? Um, so the Kuomintang, that's the modern pronunciation. They kill all these communists, and the communists they get out of there. And Stalin, who has been training the nationalists in training the Kuomintang in like modern warfare, on the one condition that please don't massacre all the communists in Shanghai, please. They do it anyway, and he's like, these guys. Stalin doesn't think communism could work in China, but he's sort of wrong. Okay, one sec. All right, sorry, I'm still setting up the stage. So from 1927 to 1936, it's the Chinese Civil War Part 1. And basically, it's just Chiang Kai-shek, instead of like fixing all the stuff wrong with his country, he's like obsessed with fighting the communists. And one of the weird things about that is that in 1931, Japan invades Manchuria. We always call it Manchuria. That's like Japanese propaganda. They invade China in 1931. It's China now. It was China then. It was China before that. It's China. It's been China since 1644. They invaded, and they're like, oh, we're just checking out railroad stuff. We're just making sure our railroad's good because we won this railroad at the end of the Sino-Japanese War, I think. We just want to make sure our railroad's all right. And we think they were messing with the railroad, so we invaded it. And they set up this fake government called Manchukuo. That Kuo is the same as the Kuomintang, just means country, or kingdom, or state, something like that. So Manchukuo, and they run into our wonderful friend Henry Puyi, who is now allowed to wear glasses and even ride his bicycle, but he has now been kicked out of the Forbidden City because everyone's broke, and they're like, hey, why are we paying a bunch of eunuchs to steal national treasures and sell them on the black market? Great question. Uh, so they, you know, he's still got a retinue. He's still got people to go with him, but he really wants to. He'd really like to do the only thing he knows how to do, which is be the emperor of, you know, be the heir to Qianlong and Shunfang and all these other emperors. And the Japanese go up to him, specifically this woman named Yoshiko Kawashima, I think. I was just looking her up for a thing with my board game, Three Kingdoms Hold'em. She's going to be the queen of the Japanese faction. But so that's why I know her name off the top of my head. But yeah, Yoshiko Kawashima, she dressed like a man all the time, and she was bisexual and very exciting. She was a big spy, and she's like, "Hey, Puyi or Xuantong or whatever they're calling him at the time. Sometimes his name is Henry. His full name, if you can give him one, is Henry Puyi Aishinjiro Xuantong. That's all of his names that I think. Yeah, Puyi is his personal name, and Xuantong is his emperor name. Aishinjiro is his clan name. It's a whole thing. But yeah, so she basically convinces him like, hey, the Japanese have a really cool idea for you, and it's like having you be in charge, you know. And he's like, that's like actually in charge, not just trapped in a fancy palace as a figurehead, but like actually in charge. She's like, yeah, and he goes, that sounds great. So he takes his boat over to Manchuria, which you the Japanese are fighting the Chinese. If you're trying to be the emperor of China, the one rule is don't join the Japanese. Duh. But this guy's, he's spent more time having people whipped to death than he has, emperoring. So he's in Manchuria, and he's like, wow, the new digs. I'm the emperor of this place, and they go, you're the CEO. He's like, ah, man, is there a way I could be the emperor? And they're like, no, we have an emperor, and his name is Hirohito, and he's cool. And I gotta circle back to that when I'm done with this part of Puyi. So then he gets into the hotel, and he goes, wow, I'm in charge. I'm the CEO of Manchuria. Hey, I was just wondering, can I go ride my bicycle real quick? And they're like, no, you can't. We're actually just going to give you stuff to sign, and you can have people whipped to death for your entertainment if you want to. And he goes, all right. And then he brings his opium addicted wife and his other wife, who I think later also gets addicted to opium. And they do what people who are addicted to opium like to do in fancy hotels, which is smoke opium and be sad. And he likes to do what he likes to do, which is have people whipped to death for his entertainment. And let's circle back to Hirohito, the emperor of Japan. His grandfather is Meiji, who did all the impressive stuff up to like the 1910s, you know. And then his son, Meiji's son, Taisho, was a problem. Taisho, like Meiji is this really capable, very impressive. Like, he's an authoritarian monarch, but he's an impressive guy. He can do a lot of stuff. He was the one, like, he was coordinating all the modernization of a country that was not used to. It's a hard thing to do, to go from backwater, irrelevant country to world power. Pretty difficult, I would say. And so he leaves this task to Taisho, who is like medically dumb. There's a shorter way to say that, but you're not supposed to say it anymore. Doctors have to be involved in how stupid he is. Like, he's not like George W. Bush, who's like a dumb guy, but like, he can drive his own car. Like one time, Taisho's supposed to be giving a speech. He just rolls it up in a tube and looks at everybody, and everyone's like, What? Because Meiji has just started this, like, he's reinvigorated this cult of state Shintoism where, like, the emperor is this divine, all powerful figure who has the last say in everything. And Taisho he declares war on a bunch of countries that Japan doesn't go to war with. And they're like, we're just not, like, people get to saying, like, the patriotic thing to do is not to listen to the emperor if he has a bad idea. And that's what they have to do, because otherwise they would just be going to war on the whims of some guy who doesn't remember lunch, you know. And so the fake parliament that that uh, that Meiji set up is now the Diet is now functioning as a real parliament, and they're doing real laws. Oh, cool, you know. And the cabinet, which is really just a bunch of guys who agree with Meiji, is now being a real cabinet. And the way that the government is set up is everybody is the only branch of government that is directly under the control of the emperor is the military, which is a problem. So the military decides to invade Manchuria, and it wasn't Hirohito given the order. You know, it wasn't part of some plan. It was just a bunch of guys who were in charge of the railroad going, we got to frame some Chinese people for some shenanigans to take over. So they take over. And then, okay, so now we're going down to the Chinese Civil War, between the communists and the alliance of warlords partnering with the Kuomintang. One of the main problems of China is everybody has a landlord, and I mean, like, not like the guy you pay rent to for your apartment, but I mean like the there's no way to buy land if you don't have land. And they're just charging outrageous prices to milk as much money as physically possible out of the peasants because they don't regard them as people. And you pay it because of Confucianism and all this other stuff. And the communists have this idea of like, no, we're not doing that. We're redistributing everything, and they decrease the taxes everywhere they go because they're so high. They're stiflingly high. I read Red Star Over China, which is it's been critiqued as being propaganda for pro communist propaganda, but it reads really well, so it does work on me. They do a lot of plays. The army does a crazy number of plays, and they're all modern and hip. And like usually Chinese plays are like opera, and it's like, but like this is like, oh, like they're doing like as I mean, I hate to say SNL because SNL is just a bunch of but like they're doing like live takes on the news in a very authentic way, and where people go, oh, what SNL used to be before Reels. Uh, and in 1936, they're still in the middle of the Civil War, and you would think that if you were the leader of China, if you were Chiang Kai-shek, your main thing would be, okay, the Japanese have been occupying your territory for the last 5 years. Maybe fight them about it. Maybe say, I don't like it when you do that to me, Japan. You know? But he keeps saying this thing. He keeps saying, no, 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 no. Japan is a disease of the skin, but the communists are a disease of the heart. Crazy. So he's just spending everybody's money fighting these further and further away Chinese people. They're further and further away communist people. They get to over here, Yan'an. It's pink, like a pinko. Isn't that fun? And they're doing, they've got this. It's like the size of Switzerland, which is not big for China, but it's bigger than, my apartment. So it's something. And his Stalin sends some people to kidnap Chiang Kai-shek, and they kidnap him and they hold him in a cave. And it's 1936, and they say, "Hey, fight the Japanese." And he's like, "No." And they're like, "Sir, please fight the Japanese." He's like, "Sir, if you think I'm an authority, you should let me out of jail." And they're like, "Sir, I can't do that." He's like, "Why do you keep calling me sir if you're not going to do what I say?" if you don't respect me as a leader, kill me right now. My neck's right here. But if you're gonna call me sir, how about we go ahead and do um, how about we go ahead and let me out of here so I can get at those nasty communists. And basically they put him in timeout until he's willing to say, okay, I guess we'll fight the people invading China. Crazy. Um, but it's still a waiting game where he's trying to figure out, like, okay, China's in complete disrepair. The Japanese we have so many people, but none of them are mobilized. And Japan has way fewer people, but way more of them are mobilized, and they're doing way better than us. So how do we beat them? And then in 1937, a different part of the army, nobody told them to. It wasn't Hirohito's orders. But they decide to frame some shenanigans on some Chinese people. What's called the Marco Polo Bridge incident. And they use that as an excuse to take Beijing, and then they take Shanghai, and they invade China. And it's 1937, which is still before World War II, if you ask American textbooks for some reason. But it's clearly 6 years into World War II, where the Japanese are fighting China. Like, that's the first part. They're in China the whole time. The second Sino-Soviet War, or the second Sino-Japanese War is so definitively part of World War II. But this is before the Tripartite Pact. So Germany is allied with China at this point. And I mean, like, loosely, like, they've been training their army. Hold on. Anyway, they've been training their army and making them all modernized and stuff. You know, like a nice thing to do. And the Japanese invade. Hold on, you can actually see it. Is it now bright enough outside that I can turn off this horrible light? Let's see. Yeah, I would say so, wouldn't you? Okay. Yeah, doesn't that look way better? All right, so if you look at here, this is what they take in 1931, and this is the Soviet Union, and this is Japan in orange. And the first thing hold on, and then they invade here, 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 and here, and here, and they go up the Yangtze River. The Yangtze River is the biggest, most important, most central river in China. It's like the Mississippi for us. But if New Orleans was also New York, you know, Shanghai is a very important city, and it's on the delta of the Yangtze, and it's also the center of culture. It's like if New Orleans was also New York. And they take that fast, like it's barely defended. And that's because Chiang Kai-shek is pulling back to fight the Japanese, and he doesn't want to, like, they put up a little bit of a defense, and basically the entire Chinese Air Force is taken out in the battle for Shanghai. Then the next city up, which is sort of like our Memphis, you know, in terms of like important cities and how far away from the water they are, is Nanjing. It's called Nanjing now. And it's in southern capital. It's a historical capital of China. It's the capital of the early Ming Dynasty, and it's currently the capital of China after the fall of Beijing, I think, or I think even before that. But it's where the nationalists are hooked up. It's a very important city, and it's very historic. So It's also the seat of government where Hung Choi-chuen, the Chinese younger brother of Jesus Christ, ruled, not 80 years prior. But Chiang Kai-shek is like, oh, if we defend this city, it's going to be house-to-house fighting, and they're going to destroy all of Nanking. So we're going to get out of there and save the people of Nanking, and that is not what occurred. It's called the Nanking Massacre now, but you probably know the other name, which I probably shouldn't say on YouTube. But it's the that of Nanking, and they go in with. They're like mad that the Japanese don't understand what surrendering is. They don't respect it, um, because the Japanese method of warfare is like supposed to be like for samurai, which is like very upper class nobility stuff. It's like representative warfare. If only your nobles are fighting, that's not a lot of people. You know, they're representing the whole group, but it's not a ton of people. So for them to surrender, it's very shameful. But for regular people to surrender, it's fine. You can give up, uncle. You know. But if your whole deal in society is you take up tax dollars and then if the on the loose idea that if war happens you have to fight them, then okay, you know, if you're gonna fight. So they're sort of using this on the regular people who are in the army now, um, and so they just start murdering everybody, just going crazy. And the Japanese have this idea of the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, and their argument is that hey, we got our act together in spite of the Europeans. And the Europeans have so many parts of Asia. And really, Asia belongs to the Asians. And they're like, and all the other Asians are like us. And theoretically, the Japanese should have said, yeah, and meant it. But actually, they were like, no, we meant like us. Um, the Yamato Minzoku is the Aryan race of Asia, which is like maybe you guys. What if what if what if we didn't have one of those? What if you know? So they're murdering everybody in Nanking and worse stuff, and they have a competition in the newspaper to see who can cut off more Chinese heads with a samurai sword than the other, and they're printing it in the newspaper, and we're reprinting it in America, going, "Oh my God!" Because America loves China. America's had this huge, long relationship with China. The Delanos, the Forbeses, the the John Jacob Astor. There's been all these Americans who've had like so much of American history is doing the China trade and getting rich off of it and loving China, you know. And we really want them to be a republic, and they're trying their best, but you know, God love them, and they're not figuring it out. And then the Japanese go and invade them, and we're like, you know, and there's all these Americans in Shanghai and in Nanjing, and they're seeing all this, and they're going, this is horrific. You know, we got to do something about this. And but they're like, what are we supposed to do? Take boats over there and stop them? It's China. It's big. It's huge. And the country that should be defending China against China is probably China. Defending China against Japan is probably China. So let's let them have a shot at it. And uh, while retreating from Nanjing, Chiang Kai-shek has what could be described as a wacky scheme. And it's one of these wacky schemes that kills a couple 100,000 people. Those happen a lot in Chinese warfare. But this wacky scheme is he redirects the Yellow River into the Yangtze River using explosives and controlled detonation. He floods the path of the advancing Japanese army, and oh, nice, yeah, he floods the army, Anyway, oh, thank you. But he floods the Japanese army and also all the peasants who live there, and it basically the amount of losses that takes and that they've taken, because they're taking losses fighting the Chinese. It's just they keep advancing, and uh, the the Japanese, who didn't budget to start this war, like they didn't make a big plan of like, how are we gonna eat the biggest country on earth. They just decided to invade it, and they're doing crazy good, but they're not they're not going well at it. And so there's two ideas. There's the first idea, which is the northern route, and then the second idea, which is the southern route, which is basically like, okay, taking China as Japan by ourselves, like they already have Korea, but just being Japan and Korea was probably not enough to take China. Um, so maybe if we take some of the resources from the Siberian half of the Soviet Union, uh, who is busy taking Poland right now, so they don't have that many army guys over here. What if we take what if we use our base in Manchuria to take some of the stuff from Russia? And so they go and invade Russia, and there's this guy named Georgy Zhukov, and he says, "No, you don't." And he uses a bunch of crazy modern tank movements to shoot the Japanese back into Manchuria. And they go, "Ha ha ha! This is a border skirmish." And everyone goes, "Okay, so the northern strategy's out." And there's no the parliament can't make these choices. They're loyal. They're directed only by the emperor. And Hirohito is sort of striking a balance between his grandfather Meiji and his dad Taisho, who did nothing. Like, and Hirohito's not a dumb guy. Hirohito's like an architect. Like that's what he liked to do in his spare time, is architecture. I don't know if he built buildings or anything, but he probably did. I mean, you could get a building built if you're the emperor. But like, he people interviewed him. He's not a dumb guy. Had the best education that Japanese money could buy. Um, he's the only one with the authority to call off the war. But also, like everybody else who's tried to call off the war, there's been a bunch of Japanese politicians who are like, guys, I don't know if we should be doing the war, and they all get murdered. So everyone's kind of afraid to be the brakes on the war because they don't investigate the political murders because they're not used to having a government, they're a representative government. Or is this supposed to happen? Who knows? It's not. You shouldn't do that. If people kill your politicians, you should look into that. And also tell people, like, you don't get to vote like that. You don't get to just kill people to affect policy. You can't do it. It's called a government by assassination. It's a term they use a lot in discussing this point of history. So Hirohito's like, well, it's going well, and I'm sort of supposed to be this figurehead, but also I can make the calls. So, could he have stopped it? Maybe. We don't know. He didn't. He didn't really try either, but he did end it eventually. Spoiler alert. So yeah, the Japanese army is involved in Kotkin Goal, and they just have China. They just have these parts right here, and there's all these beautiful, wonderful European territories all over Asia. Look at these. Look at Indonesia. It's the Dutch. The Philippines is owned by America. Hong Kong is owned by Britain. Vietnam is owned by France. This whole thing is owned by France. Malaya is owned by Britain. Singapore is owned by Britain. Burma is owned by Britain. These wonderful islands over here, Hawaii is owned by the United States. There's all kinds of British and American and all kinds of other stuff over here. And they're thinking, Well, they come up this. The Navy comes up with this idea called the Southern Strategy. And yeah, let's go to the Philippines. I'm going to keep mentioning you guys a lot. Um, it's World War II, in the Pacific. So yeah, the Philippines. I bet you live in Manila. Just a guess. It's a very populated city. Uh, so it's on Luzon, one of the biggest island in the Philippines, I think. Maybe Mindanao's bigger. I'm not sure. Um, what was I saying? Oh yeah. So um, they're thinking about the Southern strategy, and the Southern strategy is taking all of this stuff. Can they do it? Who knows? No one ever has. I mean, the Europeans took it, but they all took it individually over hundreds of years, cooperating with each other. They didn't take all of it at once by force in half a decade or however long it would take. And I've heard that Stalin was directing this idea, but in 1940, it's now 1940. FDR has been elected a third time. Crazy. Everyone's in the middle of the depression. Also, I mean, China doesn't feel the depression because it's been rough the whole time, but it's now 1940, and we say, hey, guys, if you're going to keep, we really don't want you to use American oil to starve China to death, or and kill everybody. We have most of the oil in the world, so no, you can't use it, you know. And the Japanese are like, what? But we were planning the whole time. We were planning to be using your oil to kill all these people. And America's like, yeah, man, we're really, we can find other people to buy this oil, man. It's really making us sad what you're doing over there. And so the Japanese are now running out of oil. They have this navy that they've, if you're shipping people back and forth from Japan and China, it means you burn oil, and that means you have to use oil. And do you know how much oil is in Japan? There's no oil in Japan, so they have to find some oil pretty quickly. Do you know where there's oil? Right here in Indonesia, but that's for the Dutch. But guess what? The Dutch are busy being taken over by the Germans. So Japan says, oh, there's this golden opportunity now. While World War II is still going on in Europe, you know, we might not be able to take any of the Soviet stuff, but we can take all this other stuff because they're busy fighting on their home turf. It'll just be just like we took all the German stuff in the Pacific during World War I, And but there's this problem. The Philippines is run by America, and they've got all these other territories, and also Great Britain with the most powerful navy on the face of the earth. And Roosevelt has relocated our fleet here. It's normal. The Pacific Fleet is normally in San Francisco, but now it's in Honolulu in a place called Pearl Harbor near Station Hypo. Station Hypo is this. It's a code intercept place, and they break. Their job is to break the Japanese codes, and they're really good at it. They break the red code, they break the blue code. It takes a couple months and a lot of effort, but you can break these codes. They're not super hard. Eventually, Japan comes up with the purple code, and that one's the most complicated of all. And this guy Joe Rochefort is the one in charge of that particular program of figuring out if there's any sneaky plans going on in the Pacific. And somewhere in the middle of 1940, they changed the codes to the purple codes, and so everyone's in the dark. And it'll take a while, but they'll get it back going. As long as the Japanese are not planning something crazy sneaky right in the middle of it. Okay, let's see. Oh, another thing, the Japanese don't team up with Nazi Germany to take on the Soviet Union because they were not asked. They were completely surprised by or no, sorry, not the Soviet Union, Poland, I guess. But so like Germany declares war on Poland without telling Japan, and now they're allied. Now their main ally, like they signed the anti-Comintern Pact with Germany, which means the anti-Soviet Union Pact, and then now Germany has signed a pact with the Soviet Union. So what is Japan supposed to be doing? They don't know. So they're like, all right, no Soviet Union, whatever. Germany's being weird. Well, I guess we got to do this all by ourselves, but let's take advantage of this thing. So they start planning, and they ask Isoroku Yamamoto, and they go, hey, do you think we can win this war against the United States? And Yamamoto has spent a bunch of time hanging out in the U.S., looking at oil fields and looking at factories and, writing stuff down and taking pictures. He's like, oh, you asking my opinion? No, I think we would lose. And they're like, oh, no, you're supposed to say win. And he's like, no, but I mean, we're going to lose, man. And in any kind of long-term war, we would lose with America. There's too much stuff over there. You haven't seen it. They got sandwiches you wouldn't believe, Which is true. I mean, how many sandwiches could somebody who grew up in Japan believe? That it's not a very sandwich kind of place, especially not in 1940. So they go, okay, Yamamoto, you gotta figure out a way to take out the American fleet, because obviously, if we like the Americans are staying out of World War II, we are not doing World War II. We did World War One for the Europeans. Uh, we gave them all democracy. That's it. We have our own continent. Thank you very much, and that's what our business should be. And also making bombs for everybody. Sales are going up, so that's good. But the U.S. is trying to stay out because we have this continent, the best continent on Earth. I fear that, yeah, that's a great point, John Sandwich. Um, but yeah, no, he was like, "No, we can't invade the U.S." And he goes, "Okay, but give it your best shot." This is a command, by the way. He's like, "Okay," and so he puts his whole self into coming up with a plan um, to strike the Americans, and he has a couple of things. One, he noticed that the British were fighting. It was, I think, it's the way the British were fighting the Italians, where they had, or maybe the Italians were fighting the British, but in the Mediterranean, the British and the Italians were fighting each other, where like ship-based aircraft were taking off and destroying land-based targets successfully. And Yamamoto is the first guy. Whoever does this, the British or the Italians, they don't take note of it as like a game-changing piece of strategy. And so the whole thing is, it's a big Swiss watch. Dan Carlin said that. But he's like, if we're gonna take out the Pacific Fleet, we got to do it. The only way to do it is with an aircraft carrier. And luckily, they have the best aircraft on Earth. The Mitsubishi Zero is literally the best fighter aircraft on Earth. Like, no ifs, ands, or but about it. It can do the best turns. It can go the fastest. It can shoot the most. And it not only is the aircraft good, but the pilots are good. They've been busy fighting people in China. They've been busy doing all kinds of stuff. They have this incredible aircraft. It even fits on aircraft carriers. Isn't that great? And when Westerners hear the statistics, when Americans hear the statistics, they go, "There's no way you can make a plane like that. That's crazy." I mean, no, I mean a plane like that with armor that thick, you can't do turns like that. There's just no. You're lying. This is propaganda. The trick is, it does not have armor. It's a tin can. But no one would understand why you would put your pilots in a tin can like that. But if the tin can has teeth, it takes you a while to notice that it's a tin can. Um, so during the whole time that they're planning, uh, oh, I forget what it's called, but this is off the top of my head, so it doesn't matter. Uh, oh, what operation is it called? Anyway, the whole time they're planning Operation Do Pearl Harbor, um, Operation China 11, if you will. That's not what they called it. Um, the whole time they're coming up with Operation Do Pearl Harbor, uh, they're negotiating a peace treaty with the United States, and so like everyone is on like low alert because uh, you know the Japanese. Okay, and the Japanese are convinced that if they take anything over here, the Americans will just join up with all their European friends anyway, which is arguably not true. We've let the Europeans suffer through a lot already, and we seem to be pretty fine with it. Churchill, you know, who is busy starving India to death at the moment. True. Um, he keeps calling Roosevelt on the phone and being like, "Please, randomly invade Europe. Please, the American people will love it." And Roosevelt's like, "I do not get that feeling over here. I'm like an elected representative. It's not like the president can just do a bunch of wars without asking anybody." I don't like Donald Trump at all, by the way. My man sucks. Um, but that's you have to use the legislative branch to declare war. I don't care who you are. And that's what FDR says to Churchill all these times. And they're organizing. Um, yeah, they're organizing. People are getting a little bit of news. It's the Japanese are planning something because no one can tell where their ships are. Like that's one of the things. Normally, if there's a big naval thing, everybody takes a note of it and shares notes and goes, "Hey, the Japanese are here." You know, the Japanese are here, and and everyone's just keeping track of where the Japanese fleet is, and then nobody can see it. It's not anywhere, but it's the Pacific's a big place, so it could be a lot of places. Um, and they see a ship or two off the coast of Hong Kong, and maybe there's one by Singapore, and maybe there's one by Manila, and but who knows where they're coming, where they're going to attack, whether it's going to be Manila or Hong Kong or maybe the Philippines, but whichever one of those they hit, um, hopefully we'll get enough forewarning about it. And like we're negotiating peace on December 8th. December 8th on this half of the international date line. December 7th over here. The international date line, it's like right here. And it basically is the end of where Japan ends up taking territory. But that's later. So, yeah, so we're in the middle of negotiating peace with the Japanese when they do a boat 9/11 to us, right in our boats, right in Pearl Harbor, where we kept them to be safe. That's the whole point of a harbor, is to be safe for boats. That's where boats put their guard down. Also, we're not at war. Declare war like an adult. You know, you can't just declare war. Oh, I want to do a sneaky one. You're a country of 70 million people. Could you please be mature? You know. And so they do a sneak attack, which is not really congruent with the samurai code of ethics. Anyway, um, they do a sneak attack and they blow up all of our important ships. There's a couple of aircraft carriers in the Pacific. Nobody knows that they're really that important. The only people who know that aircraft carriers are super important to combined arms warfare are the Japanese. They're the only people on Earth who figured it out. And so they blow up what everybody thinks is you're supposed to blow up, battleships, and they sink a bunch of them, and uh, that's supposed to do is make everyone go, oh my God, the Japanese are so serious. We should make peace with them really quickly and not get involved in the war. And it's like, buddy, we were making peace with them when it happened. Clearly, that doesn't work. And also, you killed American kids. You killed American soldiers. So we're gonna, we're gonna invade Japanistan. You know what I mean? Uh, we you want to blow up our boats in our harbor. And also, one thing Pearl Harbor is the big thing. They also invade. Um, they also invade the Philippines and Hong Kong and Singapore and Pearl Harbor. They do all four of the things. So there's an invasion here. There's an invasion here. There's an invasion here, and there's an attack here. So the United States can't really we have a skeleton crew fleet that's there to defend the West Coast, which also gets shelled, which in early 1942. But Japan, Japan, the whole U.S. Mobilizes Germany because they want an excuse to sink American shipping in the North Atlantic, which is supplying Britain and indirectly China through the Burma Road. This is Lend-Lease that I mapped onto here. Because America is supplying Britain so much, but they're a neutral country, Germany wants the excuse to sink everybody in the North Atlantic, so they declare war on the United States. It's not some dumb thing. I mean, it is dumb, but it's not some dumb thing that Hitler randomly decides to do. But it is dumb. So, and then late 1941, early 1942 is just Japanese victory after Japanese victory. They take all of Indonesia. They slowly take all of the Philippines. In the Philippines, one of the guys that they take, his name is Joe Kiyomiya, one of the most interesting guys I've learned about recently. He is a Navajo Marine. He was a Marine who was a Navajo, and he enlisted in the Marines, and he was sent to the Philippines, which was headed by Douglas MacArthur. The military of it was headed by Douglas MacArthur. He was under U.S. control, but we're gonna give this up by 1950 or so. We had made plans to make it independent, but right now it's dependent. And Douglas MacArthur is in charge of the whole army and the Air Force and everything. And they told Douglas MacArthur, said, hey, something's going on, so you definitely don't want to have all your planes out where they can be blown up if somebody wants to shoot them full of holes and blow them up. That's what the Japanese do. They shoot them full of holes and blow them up. Dang it. So Joe Kiyomiya is taken prisoner in the Bataan Death March, which starts in around Christmas of 1941, and the Japanese are processing everybody that they've taken, and they go, "Oh my God, I can't believe a Japanese person would betray his own country to fight for the Americans against us." And Joe Kiyomiya is like, I am a Navajo. I am not Japanese. And they go, yeah, you can lie to us all you want, well, we can tell you're Japanese. And he's like, buddy, I don't, what are you doing? What are you talking about? I don't, I don't even speak Japanese. And they go, oh my God, you don't even speak Japanese? Let's kick this guy really hard. And eventually he convinces him that there's such a thing as Navajo and there's more kinds of people than they've personally looked at. And they realize, okay, I guess this guy isn't Japanese, but you can't take back kicking somebody in the ribs a bunch of times. And so they're just in this horrible, squalid condition. Um, why not just tell the whole Joe Kiyomiya story? Eventually, the Marines start using Navajo code talkers to communicate secretly through radio because using the Navajo language is nobody in Japan can speak Navajo. They're sure of it. And they didn't use it in the Atlantic because they thought maybe some German nerd knows Navajo. We don't know. And the Japanese asked, they knew that the US was probably doing this because they'd used Choctaw code talkers in World War One. And so they're like, it's probably some Native American language, but which one? There's hundreds, you know? You're supposed to go, okay, is it Alabama? Is it Algonquin? Is it, like, what are you supposed to do? Go through the alphabet of Native American languages that it could be? It's probably not Choctaw. You only get one war per American language. Native American language. But eventually they get recordings of it. And the way that Navajo code talking works is they have to come up with these words for an aircraft carrier. And you're not going to believe this, but Navajo does not have a traditional word for aircraft carrier or tank or troop transport or hospital ship or, really any of the stuff a modern Navy needs to talk about a lot. But they decide to use analogs. They never write a book because you can find that book. If the Japanese get a hold of that book, it's over. But so they just memorize the whole thing. And the word for aircraft carrier is whale because they don't have a word for aircraft carrier, but they do have a word for the biggest fish in the sea, and that's what an aircraft carrier is. And they don't have a word for armored troop transport, but they do have a word for something that's aquatic, that's armored, that can go on land, and that's turtle, And they don't have a word for fighter jet, but they do have a word for pelican, all this kind of stuff. So the in between the torturing people for fun in POW camps, which the Japanese love to do, they would torture each other too. It was like a equal opportunity thing. They would take prisoners and they were like, okay, you're Native American, right? And they would play the recording for them, and they would find a Choctaw guy and they'd be like, play Navajo for him, and he'd be like, no idea. And they'd be like, all right, kick him in the ribs. No food for a week. They find another Native American guy who's like Cheyenne or something, and I don't know how many there were, but there was a couple, and they would play the Navajo recording, and they were like, I don't know. He says, hey, he says, I slept with your mother. Maybe this is like a Brooklyn type, Native American guy. Who knows? And then they kick him in the ribs and no food for a week. And they bring the Navajo guy in and they play the recording. He goes, what do you think this says? And he's like, oh, the turtle. The turtles are on their way on the back of the whale, and they are friends with the pelicans. They're like, oh my, these guys are Yamato supremacists. They're racist. They're like, these Native Americans, everything's just made up animals to them. Even when they're lying to us, they're using made up animals. Okay, no, kick him in the ribs, no food for a week. He was telling the truth. That's what they said. And they take him eventually to a POW camp in Nagasaki, Japan, where Joe Kiyomiya survives the atomic blast. What a crazy guy. Anyway, so now we're still in 1941. They take they take all of the Philippines, and there's a poem that I remember. I'm trying to remember. It's a we're the battling bastards of Bataan. No mama, no papa, no Uncle Sam. Uh, no grandmas, no uncles, no nieces. No food, no ammo, no artillery pieces, and no one gives a damn. Something like that. I messed up a couple of those syllables, but uh, the Japanese have taken over all of the territory in Orange. This is their maximum extent. Going from, you know, let's see, like all around here. They've taken all this stuff. They have half the Pacific, which is the Pacific is a third of the Earth. They have like from India to you know Hawaii, India to Hawaii. That's that's an incredible amount of space. Oh my god, crazy how itchy your nose gets when you present something. Um, yeah, and they have all this territory. And how, if you're the United States, do you win that war? Because first of all, you have to wait till all the ships get built, which takes a while. And second of all, these guys are incredible at doing ships and land-based invasions. One of the things that makes invading Malaysia so easy is they decided to steal everybody's bikes. Nobody ever thought of that. They were like, well, you know, uh, everyone's counting on like the British who are in charge of Malaya are counting on the idea of like, well, you can't use motor in the jungle, and you can only walk this fast. So we only need to. But they're stealing bikes and running them through the jungle, just civilians' bikes. They didn't bring bikes with them. Their plan was to steal bikes, and they steal everybody's bikes out of the yard, and they ride over and they surround the British and they kick them out. And the British are busy, running away in Dunkirk or whatever. They're busy losing World War II while being on the winning side over here. Um, and so the how do you beat this? Because the Japanese strategy is this: we're going to take all this territory. In the time that it takes in between taking it and being invaded, we're going to fortify it. We're going to fortify it to pieces. We're going to dig in like crazy, and we're going to shoot anybody who goes on this island. And since they're going to have to take back all the territory, they're going to sue for peace before they can do all of it. Because no country, because they're taking it undefended, but they want everybody else to take it back defended while there's a huge war going on in Europe. You know, and the U.S. is fighting that war in Europe, and the U.S. is supplying that war in Europe for the Soviet Union. It's December of 1941. Moscow is being besieged. You know, like the Germans uh, have now invaded, and they've gotten as far as the edges of Moscow, and they're barely being held back. They're going to be marched back all the way to Berlin, but we don't know that for sure yet. Um, and so, the U.S. is supplying them, and the U.S. is supplying Britain, and the U.S. is supplying Australia down here, and the U.S. and we're also supplying China, and there's all this territory that you have to go through. And how do you do that? And so the guys at Station Hypo, Joe Rochefort, and those sort of fellas, um, they are busy cracking the code. Uh, Benedict Cumberbatch has to be British because of his facial structure. So we don't get a movie about these guys, but they were equally cool and even cooler because they weren't British. And we had to fight Japan all by ourselves. I'm like, they had France to lose it with and all that kind of stuff. Um, That's another thing that they start taking Vietnam and all this kind of stuff. And the reason they take Southeast Asia is because they're trying to take China. That's the whole point. And we are funneling. We used to funnel um, supplies in through Vietnam right here, which is a really easy way to get to Chongqing, the wartime capital of United China. But then they take Vietnam. So then we have this. There's one road. There's literally one road into China. There's one road into China. Isn't that crazy? There's a Belt and Road Initiative. 100 years ago, there was one road, and it went into Burma. It's too wet to make roads down here. And so we're shipping, you know, we're shipping stuff out here through the Strait of Gibraltar, through the Suez Canal, uh, and then up through Burma into China. And so they take Burma to prevent us. And we spend the whole war fighting over this. And then eventually we try flying stuff in over the Himalayas, which is called over the hump, which is crazy. But the guys at Station Hypo, um, they figure out, okay, the Japanese are going to invade Coral Sea, which the Coral Sea is like here, I think. Let me see. That's the Timor Sea. Where's the Coral Sea? Oh, yeah, sorry. Coral Sea, right here. May of 1942. And they know that the Japanese are going to be there. And so we send our aircraft carrier, and there's one called the Liberty, I think. No, the Yorktown. I think it's the Yorktown, and it gets struck but not destroyed, and we send it to um, over to wonderful Pearl Harbor, which is where it gets fixed, and uh, because just because it was struck doesn't mean you have to blow it up, even though that's what the Japanese do every time one of their boats gets struck. Uh, yeah, so we hear through the chatter, we think we've broken the purple code, and there's a space called MO, and MO is where the Japanese are going to strike next, and everybody in the brass think MO is Port Moresby, or sorry, that is where they're going to hit next. That's right, and then there's a new target AF, and where's AF? I mean, what could AF stand for? And there's a bunch of stuff that stands for AF down here, and people are like, it's AF, somewhere around here, obviously. And Joe Rochefort is like, no, I'm certain AF is Midway Atoll, the furthest part of Hawaii from the rest of the United States. This is still in Hawaii, the state. It's like Hawaii is like, if Maui is here, then hold on, then Midway is like here. It's a huge place. Like, so they think it's going to be here, and the brass doesn't believe them. And so somebody gets the idea of saying, hey, well, let's just go ahead and pretend like Midway, like the desalination plant stopped working, because if they're going to take Midway and hold troops there, you're going to need water for them. So they need to plan extra water. And we see in the codes, they go, oh, AF's water system is broken. And we go, okay, we know for sure that it's Midway then, because we just leaked that AF has a problem with the water. And so we send all four of our loose carriers. I guess we have two carriers. We have the Hornet, the Enterprise, and the Yorktown. So I think that's three. We have three carriers that we can spare, and they have four. It's called the Kido Butai, and they've been running. It's the elite, like, roam around, do whatever you want. Japanese battle unit, and they've been going around causing all kinds of ruckus all throughout the Pacific because they have extra, they have extra military equipment to just, pillage stuff with, and it's the very unit that they used to do Pearl Harbor, you know, and it was those four carriers. And the thing about Japanese carriers is that they are made of wood at the top. The top of them is made of wood. You shouldn't do that. The top of our carriers are made of metal. The top of their carriers were made of wood, you know, and bombs go through wood and wood burns and stuff. And so we catch them right at the right time. Uh, it's Coral Sea is the first battle that was done entirely indirectly, um, like without the ships seeing each other. They were just spotted by aircraft. Now everybody knows that aircraft carriers are the biggest deal in the world, and the in between. So the point of the Kido Butai is to secretly sneak attack Midway Atoll, but they don't. So they're gonna use land-based bombs, and obviously it's a sneak attack, so you don't need to do like you don't need to put torpedoes on them, which would be better useful if you were trying to sink an aircraft carrier. But then, right as when they sneak up on Midway, all the planes are off. They've taken off already, so there's nothing to blow up on the bottom. There's nothing to blow up, and they come back in, and right as they're being loaded back in, half the planes are started being loaded back in. Somebody spots a ship, some kind of ship. They're not sure, and Nagumo, who is in charge of the thing, in charge of the Kido Butai, he he's like, "What? We saw a ship," and he's like, "What if it's a carrier? And if it's a carrier, we really need torpedoes." And half the planes are ready to take off with land-based bombs again. And so he goes, "Yeah, but if it's a carrier, we really need everybody to be fighting the carrier." And so he goes, "Okay, take all the bombs off. We're doing only torpedoes." And so in the time it takes to load torpedoes onto all of the planes, uh, 3 of the carriers are hit, and they're hit by this guy named Dick Best. He hits 2 carriers in one day as a dive bomber, and they made a great movie about it called Midway, which nobody saw, but the Chinese Communist Party financed it, and they did a great job producing it. Maybe the problem was the main guy in it, who's not that bad, but if they got somebody, if they got Ryan Gosling to do it, it would have made $1 billion, even though he would be way too old to play World War II pilot. I would still watch it. Before that, we did something cool called the Doolittle Raid, which is where it was the first time we struck Japan at all. And it was the first time that Japan had been successfully. We framed it as the first time that Japan has been struck on its home island. I mean, Kublai Khan did that, but he didn't do very well at it. So we loaded. There's this guy Doolittle, James Doolittle, and we loaded him and a bunch of his Air Force buddies onto these long-range bombers, and they put a whole bunch of gas tanks in them, and they loaded them onto carriers. And they're long-range land-based bombers. They don't take off from carriers. Carrier planes have to be smaller because you only have the runway that you can fit on a boat. You don't have, infinite land runway like you do with land-based aircraft. But they figure out like we can just barely do this. And so they're supposed to take off within 400 miles of Japanese territory, bomb Tokyo, then go over and ditch in free China around here. Zhejiang province, I think. But they get spotted by somebody about 600 miles out, so 200 more miles out than they were supposed to be taking off from. And Bull Halsey makes a call like, we got to take off now. And so the ship is like rocking in the waves. And so there's like a high point, and they know how long it takes for the plane to get to the end of the runway for it to be at the high point. So they take off every 40 seconds so that every time the plane takes off, the plane is just tipping up, and it gives them just enough lift to take off. And they fly these land-based bombers over from an aircraft carrier, which no one's ever done before. And it's out of range of normal land-based bombers. It's just they put so many fuel tanks in these, and they hit Tokyo and they blow up Tokyo. Not significantly, but the Japanese are like, "What? You're not? We're supposed to be fighting you guys over there, not in our capital city. Like the emperor could have been killed." And everyone's like, "Oh my God, the emperor could have been killed. That's the worst thing that could ever happen," you know. And it's freaked everybody out. And so so then they did Midway. After Midway, the Kido Butai, they didn't tell anybody. They didn't admit, "Oh, we got hit." They were like embarrassed to tell the government and the nation and the world, like, "We lost all our aircraft carriers." They didn't lose all of them, but they lost all but one of them. They sunk them themselves. They hit them with torpedoes. They didn't want to repair them. I mean, the Japanese, they didn't repair a lot of things. Like when people got injured, you were supposed to fight until you were dead, not go to a hospital and get better. Like that's not honorable. So like, rather than these ships be paraded around as propaganda pieces, they sunk them. And then America starts the first invasion of Japanese-held territory. This place called Guadalcanal, down here, episode 1 of HBO's The Pacific. And it takes them months and months and months to. The point of Guadalcanal is to just take over a Japanese air base. And a lot of this is air bases, because control of the air is the whole thing. It's what makes you be able to advance or not. Like, airfields are a piece of infrastructure you can build on an island that can just sink aircraft. You can sink any kind of ship you want. So if you have an airfield, that's really, really powerful. And they're trying to stop the Japanese from making one and then take it over. And that's what that battle's about. And it's like it's the Marines. The point of Marines as a unit is to go from ships to land. It's to do Pearl Harbor, or it's to do a Normandy type thing. Normandy's impressive because they got the army to do it, The army is supposed to go from land to land, not from sea to land. But the whole point of having Marines is to storm onto beaches under fire. And so that's what they do. And this line is the Macarthur line. And it's all these battles that MacArthur's forces get involved in throughout the war. And then in 1943, Nimitz starts his own line. And these are the battles. So there's two forces in the Pacific. And one of them is going north and one of them is going south along here. And this is MacArthur's group. And the idea that America has is called island hopping. The idea the Japanese have is that they can't take every one of these islands, especially not our super duper fortified bases. Like there's one at Rabaul, the super duper fortified base right here, Rabaul. And the Americans have this fun idea of like saying, let's not take it. You know, you have 100,000 people on an island. We're not going on that island, but you're not either. We're going to sink all of your ships. So the whole point of the U.S. naval strategy is to sink every kind of ship, anything with a Japanese flag, troop ships, supply ships, supply ships, supply ships, supply ships, trading ships, merchant ships, supply ships, battleships, supply ships, supply ships, battleships, supply ships. The Japanese are only interested in fighting. They think it's like a waste of time to fight a supply ship because they want to fight the American Navy. They want to fight they want to destroy their ability to use guns because they don't get that if you're an island and your empire is hundreds and thousands of islands, you need boats to run that empire. You need boats to run that empire. Boats are the veins of that empire. And if all of your boats get sunk, you don't have an empire anymore. And instead of having 100,000 people ready to fight the invader, you now have 100,000 people who have to get into gardening to survive. And, it's like, it's the least climactic, least like samurai like warfare you could think of. It's just having a bunch of people stuck on an island, you know, just hot and sweaty, and they don't even build showers for their troops or anything like that. And they see Americans flying over using the island next door as an airfield, and sometimes they strafe the camp, and that's it. And that's all the war you see is everybody has to. You can't get resupplied, so everybody starts growing potatoes in the yard, and sometimes the Americans come by and strafe the potatoes, you know, and it's just like and so that's what this is about. It's not about taking back all of Indonesia. It's thousands and thousands of islands. How could you do it? You don't have to. You just have to get closer and closer to Japan to bomb Japan. You don't have to take every single island they took because they took them undefended. And the amount of effort that like digging trenches and mounting machine guns really does a whole lot to defend a place. And so like the Americans are going like, okay, what's as far as we can go and build another airfield? What's as far as we can go and build another airfield? What's as far as we can go and build another airfield? It's basically a prank on Japan. Around here, we're now in late. So that whole thing was 1942. We're now in 1943, and we have Attu Island, which is a battle that happened in Alaska. And you look at Alaska and you think, really, a battle happened in Alaska? How'd they get so close to here? Then you realize that the battle happened here, and you're like, oh, I see how Japan could have hit us there. You know, everyone else is fighting in the Pacific, and it's a jungle, and they're wearing snow stuff. We got it back. It's okay. They're not still there. All right. So now that it's 1943, the Nimitz line can start going, and you have battles like Tarawa in November, and then it starts to be 1944, and we're still in New Guinea over here. New Guinea is just horrible to fight in. You have to use the natives, and one of the things that's nice if you're going to use the natives to if using native guides is the thing that wins the war because it's just a bunch of fighting on pathways and stuff in the jungle, it's better to be nice to them and not act like you're the lord of all Asia and the Pacific, which is what the Japanese do. And so the natives side overwhelmingly with the United States and Australians, because the Australians do a lot of fighting here. It's like the Australian Coast Guard. Like the real Australian Army is here at Al Alamein, or here, wherever that is. But the Australian like Coast Guard is fighting here, barely keeping Australia from being invaded by Japan. Um, so okay, we're in 1943. We're in 1944 now, and so we've been fighting this for 3 years. We land on the battle of we fight the Battle of Saipan on D-Day, where we land in Normandy. And if you don't have these lines, to keep track of the progress we've made, it looks like we're still fighting over random islands in the middle of Japan. If you're a voter in the United States and this FDR character is running for a fourth term, like he's winning the war, he's barely not losing. We just started dying in France. Oh, great. Last war, we landed in a France that still existed. But we have the Battle of Saipan, I believe, is where the nuclear bombs took off from. Okay, so let's see. It's 1944. We have battles like Kwajalein, and there's a battle called the Philippine Sea, which is right here, just in the middle of nowhere. That's where the Philippines Sea. This is Leyte Gulf right here. But these two battles are the whole point of, like, one of the main strategies behind Japanese warfare is the idea of like the decisive battle. So they're always looking for like an anime type big boss fight, like Thanos versus all the Avengers on Avengers whatever. Like that's what the Japanese are looking for, and they're like, we can defeat Thanos if we all fight him together. And the Americans are like, we know that you were trying to do that, and we don't care about that. So, and also, the U.S. keeps putting every 6 months we have a new kind of aircraft based on what has been working and what hasn't been working in the previous. So our aircraft are getting better and better, and we also we find an intact Zero. We find an intact Mitsubishi Zero, and we have pilots, you know, testing it out, and they're like, okay, the nimbleness of this aircraft is real, but you put a couple holes in these things, they blow up. American aircraft you can take a ton of shots, and as long as they don't like literally destroy the engine with bullet holes, like you can get back to the carrier. Or as long as like there's not a fire on board, you can get back to the carrier. But like they don't even have, and they have self-sealing gas tanks in American planes, which means that like the plastic, the rubber, plastic, whatever it is that coats the inside of the fuel tank, it reacts with gasoline and oxygen to form more rubber. If there's ever, something like that. So that anytime so you can get shot through the gas tank of an American plane and through, and it will seal on both ends, and you can still have a plane at the end of it. The Zeros don't do that. They leak. In leaking gasoline in in a plane with electrical equipment, it causes fires a lot of times. Leaking gasoline in a plane that might have been struck by a tracer round, which has a flare element to it, causes fires a lot of the time. And they haven't gotten any better planes. They haven't designed any better planes because it was already really good. It was the best aircraft in the world in 1941, and now it is okay. And the pilots that used to be the most trained in the world from taking over China are now just new guys who are, they have more. They they've they might have taken the oil fields over here, but they haven't taken refineries. Like they're still running out of fuel, and maybe they're taking a couple of refineries, but like they're still running out of fuel. Um, the United States has 4/5 of all of the oil that was used in the war. Like we are doing okay. We're still an incredibly powerful oil country. Um, and so Leyte Gulf, I think, is the great turkey shoot. It was supposed to be this big anime type showdown, and the Americans have this secret technology that they have not been telling anybody about. They also stole it from the British. Ha ha. The British come up with this thing called here. Let's see Britain for scale. Okay, that's long enough. Um, they come up with this idea. It's called proximity fuses. And if there was ever a Wunderwaffe, this is it. Um, Proximity fuses are one of the problems with using high explosive shells to fight aircraft is hitting them. You can get really close with a big bowling ball made of C4, and if you don't hit that aircraft, you just scared the guy. You get within 6 inches, nothing happens. Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. That's because hand grenades land on dirt, which is near you, but high explosive shells land, miles away. But the British have this idea of what if we could figure out, we put a small little radio radar thing in a shell, and it beeps out a mild signal, and then if that gets reflected back into a small, teeny tiny sensor at the beginning or at the middle, it blows up. And they try it, and it doesn't work. And then the Germans try it. The Germans had this idea first. Oh no! The evil man with the lawnmower is here. He's here to interrupt me. No, I'll be all right. But so they come up with proximity fuses, and what they end up figuring out is they get what it's like a Christmas tree company that makes like these really small bulbs, and when it spins really sick. It spins really, really fast, and it breaks glass in there, and that forms a battery. That battery powers the. It doesn't last very long, but it only has to last as long enough that it gets near the zero, and then you can dial them in, and so the American shells are just 10 times as effective as Japanese shells because you don't have to hit the planes anymore to blow up and kill them. you know? And it's like you would see it. It's like, did that guy even get hit? But if it blows up near zero, there's no shielding. They go down, you know? And around this time, Leyte Gulf, they decide to start this cool new tactic called, you know what? I'm just going to crash right into that boat, actually. Thank you very much. I'm going to crash directly into the boat because a plane is worth less than a boat, and I'm worth less than a boat captain. And also, it's scary up here, and I don't like flying very much, and everyone yells at me when I come back alive. So I'm going to do the honorable thing here. And, like these are guys who barely know how to fly their aircraft going up against Americans who you can hit with a bunch of bullets and they still keep shooting at you. And they're like, oh, goodness, And they, yeah, they're charging at the American towers, and the Americans use this thing. It's a decent idea if the Americans don't have magic bombs that blow up even if they get near you. So it means shooting down, shooting down kamikaze pilots are it's like a lot easier because we have magic bombs that we stole from the British uh, that no one knows about because we're like, you know, we intercepted traffic that were like the Japanese are like these guys have scary good eyesight, and so we decided to leak the idea that we were all eating carrots, and carrots give you really good eyesight. They don't. Carrots do not give you any kind of powers except for they're good for you generally. Maybe there's a couple of things in carrots that help with your eyes. That's not why we have that idea. We have that idea as a cover for World War II to be like, hey, everybody, like they made everybody eat carrots and say, this is going to help you with your eyesight. Because sometimes they wouldn't even tell the pilots, they wouldn't even tell the gunners that we have magic shells that blow up way closer to, even when you barely hit the plane. They would feed him a bunch of carrots and say, "Hey, you have superpowers now. Shoot from these planes." And everyone would be like, "Oh my God, I'm incredible at shooting down planes now." But it was really just that. It's really just that they were using magic bombs, and what's so funny to me is like, you know, H-Man over here is constantly trying to come up with like secret munitions and weapons that will win the war. Like for example, like the V2 rocket, which you have to shoot 10 of to kill one British person. That's really bad math, you know. Uh, it scares people, but like the British had a saying about it, and it was "keep calm and carry on," which basically means like just ignore it; it'll go away. Uh, ridiculous, ridiculous. But we have a couple of wonder weapons ourselves. The shoot them and hit planes that you don't even hit, just because the bomb understands it's near a plane, or and also atomic bombs. They start being deployed at this point. Those proximity fuses start being deployed in Europe, and it basically ends trench warfare because a trench works because as long as the shell doesn't hit directly into the trench, it doesn't blow up you and your comrades. But if you calibrate the shell to blow up 50 feet in the air, it doesn't matter where you are in the trench. If the shell is anywhere near you, it's shooting fragments down into the trench and killing or hurting everybody. So trench warfare is useless. We have proximity fuses, and so we're now here. It's now 3 years into this war. We're making some progress in Italy and Germany, but that one's probably going to go first because the Soviet Union is making serious progress into occupied territory over here. We have their greatest extents in right here. These are these are Axis countries, and purple is Great Britain. But like we're like here. We're not even in Japan yet. We're like here. We're like here. And Douglas MacArthur, who spent so much of his life in the Philippines, is he goes to meet Roosevelt in the middle of the Pacific, and Nimitz is like, we got to invade Taiwan, and Douglas MacArthur's like, no, because he made this big speech when they took him off Corregidor. Corregidor is this tiny island in the middle of Manila Bay, like right in the middle of Manila Bay. There's another tiny island just off Manila Bay that sort of guards the entrance to it called Lubang. I'll talk about that soon. But this Corregidor is this tiny spit of island that if you want to get ships in and out of Manila Bay, you have to control. And they basically made Douglas MacArthur leave that at gunpoint and took him down to Melbourne while his men all got captured by the Japanese, and they called him Dugout Doug because he was in the dugout. He wasn't playing the game. And he says, people of the Philippines, I shall return. He didn't say we, he said I, because Douglas MacArthur loves to ignore orders if he feels like it, which turns out well almost all the time. He's also become a famous general by just like being really obnoxious and flamboyant, and like he submits a bunch of stories to reporters for them to cover, and the only name they have of them is MacArthur. You would think, he, some of the people who worked for him loved him, and some of them really hated him. The Dwight D. Eisenhower, the future president and supreme commander of the forces in Europe, said that he studied dramatics under MacArthur, instead of Warcraft or whatever. Anyway, he makes this argument to Roosevelt. He's like, we have to invade the Philippines, not Taiwan, because the Philippines are ours. They're our colony. We're not going to give them up. Like, not ours, like, and we need to control them forever, but ours, like, we made an obligation to these people by colonizing them, that we would rescue them if they got taken over by another power. What else could that possibly mean? We have an obligation to the people of the Philippines. And so they start invading down in Mindanao, and then they start slowly making their way up here. And they get to Lubang. Lubang is this tiny island in just outside of Corregidor. It's pretty close to the Manila Bay, and it's this little island. There's a bunch of rice farming and cows and stuff like that going on there. And there's this guy, Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, who on December 31st, 1944, is deployed to, so the very last day of 1944, he's deployed to Lubang as basically like a guerrilla unit. Like, we don't have the forces to take this island, but we know that the Americans are coming here, and when they do come here, it's your job to kill them, take their stuff, and live off the island until you get orders to surrender from your commanding officer. And you have specific orders. As a secret spy, you're not allowed to kill yourself. You're not allowed to commit kiri or seppuku or any of that. No kamikaze stuff, okay? You have to be alive. And he's like, oh, gosh, man, are you sure? That's a lot to ask me, to not take my own life if things get uncomfortable, And they're like, yes, but it's very serious, and don't surrender. Don't surrender no matter what. Unless you get orders from your commanding officer, don't surrender. And he's like, okay. And they say this to everybody. But he really took it in. And so it's 1944, and the Americans land on the island sometime in, I don't know, February or May or sometime in 1945. And they take it, and he loses a bunch of buddies in the fight against the Americans. But he's skulking around, taking pot shots at him, and he finds chewing gum wrappers on the island, and he's like, what? They're chewing gum. I'm fighting a war. These guys are hanging out. They're chewing gum. They shipped chewing gum to this island, and they littered. They littered in a war. They littered. How decadent could these Americans be? And this is the guy who spent 30 years on the island of Lubang. I will get to him at the end. But they make after, let's see. So now we have Iwo Jima in in February of 1945. And Iwo Jima, the commander of Iwo, the thing that makes it such a terrible battle is that the whole time through island hopping, the Japanese have commanded their soldiers to form wave attacks, like in Plants vs. Zombies, or like in Super Monkey Ball, and charge defenders, and people get PTSD just from shooting down so many charging with bayonets because they're out of ammo. When you're out of ammo, charge at the guys. And they'll shoot you, and then you can't have been said to have surrendered. And Iwo Jima, the guy in charge of the Japanese, is like, no, we're gonna. You can't do that. You can't throw away your life like that. Another thing that I learned about this, I can't figure out where to put this in here. We were mailing Japanese people's skulls back to our girlfriends. American soldiers were doing that. Now, they were making necklaces out of our ears, you know, or some. Maybe no, I think we were doing that to them too. There were ear necklaces being made. But one of the things that Americans would do is we would like when they would find a Japanese skull, which is actually usually inside somebody's head meat, they would try and turn it into a skull and mail it back to their girlfriends. And their girlfriends would not be freaked out about this. They would be like, "Oh my God, he's so brave." And they would show all their girlfriend friends. And the Japanese would like in Time magazine they did this. And or like Life magazine, one of those magazines, they did this. And it was just this like girl posing with like this skull of a Japanese guy that her boyfriend had either found or killed. And the Japanese were like, "Oh my God, look what they're doing to their bodies!" And there's like different ways because the trick to making a skull, like you can boil the head to get all the meat to fall off, but there's still going to be some meat on the inside. So the real trick, it turns out, is to just leave it in an ant pile for a few days. The ants will eat up everything that's important. Then you can mail the skull to your girlfriend. What? Anyway, uh, so Iwo Jima is this big. It's supposed to take 2 weeks, and it takes months, and it's 50,000 American casualties, a Vietnam worth of casualties for this island that you don't know where it is. You're taking my word for it that it's right here, you know. And that's one of the battles. This is another one of the battles. Okinawa. It's another tens of thousands. I mean, I'm going off the top of my head. I don't know the casualty numbers, but at least one of the two of these is 50,000 people. 58,000 people die in Vietnam. 58,000 Americans die in Vietnam. Millions of Vietnamese people die in Vietnam. Vietnam is currently resisting the imperialist power of Japan. When they get done resisting the imperialist power of Japan, they will resist the imperialist power of France. When they're done resisting the imperialist power of France, they will resist the imperialist power of America because they want to be their own country, it turns out. And so, we're fighting these. And Okinawa is special because Okinawa is in Japan. And I mean, this whole thing's Japan. This is Japan. This is Japan. This is less Japan than the other parts of Japan. Is this Japan? I don't know. But Okinawa is full of Japanese civilians. One of the nice things about the Pacific is very few civilians. There's a ton of civilians in China. Tens of millions of civilians are killed. After Doolittle lands in Zhejiang province, the Japanese killed 250,000 civilians randomly for probably helping James Doolittle out of China. Like, it's crazy how many civilians die in China. But one of the nice things about like the island of Midway, nobody lives there. Who lives on Kauai Lane? Not a ton of people. Like, compared to who lives in Nanjing, China, like which one of those is more populated? Saipan, or Shanghai. But Okinawa has civilians on it. And, Americans are expecting that you'll be able to take civilian hostages just like you are in Germany. They've been fighting in Italy and Germany and in Africa and all over all over the globe. And when you say, "Hey, we're only looking for," when you find a guy to speak in Tamazight and say, "Hey guys, we're looking for the French who are allied with the Germans, not civilians. Civilians will be given food and water. We don't want to kill you. We're the Americans." They go and they get the food and water and they go, "Okay, great. By the way, the army guys are over there." and the U.S. soldiers go blow up wherever they said the army guys were, and that's how taking civilian prisoners works. Sometimes 10% of them maybe resist, and you have to treat them like enemy combatants, and that's horrible. But that's war. It's not nice. It's not a nice place to be. Uh, a war zone. But in Okinawa, 90% of the civilians resist. 90%. The United States military, in order to maintain its perimeter, has to kill 90% of the civilian old women with sharpened bamboo sticks who are being yelled at by Marines who do not want to shoot them. And then she's charging at them, and and it's like, what is going on? Like, there's the whole time, every time they take an island, the soldiers commit suicide. Well, that's the soldiers. That can't be everybody, you know. But like, they're being fed propaganda, and they don't. It's like the propaganda that the Japanese are telling the population about. Like the United States Marines is like, the Marines, you have to kill both of your parents to be accepted in the Marines, and they're only recruited from the nation's prisons and insane asylums. So they're nothing but prisoners and insane criminals who murdered their parents. And the Japanese women are very much interested in taking their own lives rather than being subjected to the kind of thing that women in Japanese occupied territories are subjected to when the Japanese take those territories. And so the tens of thousands of people die in Okinawa, and this is in April of 1945. Around now, the Trinity test goes off in New Mexico, and so the Trinity test goes off, and they realize, like, oh, we have but we have achieved nuclear bombs. It was not a theory. We did do nuclear bombs. And they tell Harry Truman, and he goes, great. Or they tell, oh, that's right. So it's April of 1945. Roosevelt dies, April 14th. Same day as Lincoln. Crazy. 80 years apart. 80 years later, 80 years after 1865, it's April 14th, 1945. And while getting his portrait painted in Warm Springs, Georgia, FDR has a big old stroke, and he's still getting his portrait painted. And then when you see, I was reading a biography of FDR, and they gave a lot of his like blood pressure, and his blood pressure readings are like guy who is going to have a stroke tomorrow for like the last 6 months of his life. So like, he like all he did was like drink whiskey, smoke cigars, and was physically incapable of exercising. Like, my man was going to have a stroke. FDR seemed to have like governed like Joe Rogan would. Like, he wasn't like an ideological guy. Like, he wasn't like far left. Like, when he was the governor of New York, he ran a pretty meat and potatoes, you know, administration. It was pretty normal as far as state governments were going. But the Congress that he got put in charge of was, and in 1932, he didn't even run as like, I'm going to do all this crazy socialist stuff. I'm not crazy. It was great. I'm a big New Deal guy. But, he was just like, I think the Republican is bad, and I'll be better for the American people. The only thing I fear is letting the Republicans in office, and the Republicans just screwed up the economy. So everyone's like, yeah, all right, FDR, he seems cool. And then the House of Representatives that got voted in was incredibly, like, pro worker and all this kind of stuff. And he was like, "Yeah, sure, that sounds like it'll win elections." And he would just talk to people. He would get experts in and talk to them for 3 hours at a time. He didn't like reading. That's what I mean when I say he governed like Joe Rogan would have. He's like talking to important people, or and like that's how he's forming his opinions. Interesting way to govern. Better than looking at TV. Um, but yeah, because of his stroke in April 14th, 1945, FDR never got to experience TV, which is too bad. He was very good at radio. Like that's one of the things that makes FDR so special is that he figured out how to talk into microphone. My friends. That's what he would always call the American people. The only thing to fear is fear itself. Like that's how he's speaking. Like Winston Churchill, he can write a line, but he can't deliver it. We shall fight them on the beaches, on the landing grounds. You're like, on the landing grounds. Oh my god! But and Hitler is like, yeah, 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 because he's used to an unmicrophoned kind of speaking where you have to be performative and use your diaphragm and your uh, uh, voice. It's the same kind of speaking that you would learn if you were training to be a Baptist minister around this time. I'm not. The only thing I'm connecting them on is that they were public speakers who were not used to microphones. But MLK Jr. also, that's why he has that very distinctive way of talking. Like, I've been to the mountaintop. Like it's not. He's not aiming for a microphone. Like it's a project from the pulpit kind of speech. But FDR was really good at just talking like a regular person into a microphone. I would have liked to think he could have done a better version of this video. Um, so now it's May of 1945. You know what happens that's important in May of 1945? There's no more Third Reich at all. Hitler decides, you know what? I've had enough birthdays. Time to go underground and let everybody be murdered for my hubris. Because Germany, the war, they didn't really lose territory in World War One, and they all got this idea of like, oh, we were stabbed in the back, and we could have won it, but the socialists, and this kind of stuff. Um, but everyone in the Allies was like, no, no, we're cutting up Germany, and Patton and Zhukov have gotten. I don't know who's in charge of the Soviet forces, but uh, Eisenhower and everybody, they've all gotten to the edge of Berlin, and we let the Soviets take it because they don't mind taking casualties, and we do. And they took, 27 million people died in the Soviet Union in World War II. That's a crazy amount. 20 million in China, maybe. It's really hard to tell. That's a crazy number of people to lose. Just, I mean, unfathomable. We lost 400,000. 400,000. It's a lot for an American war. We've never lost a million in a war. We've never done it one time. They did it 27 times in that war. China did it 20 times in that war. Just an unfathomable amount of loss. And they took Berlin, and they met the Allied forces, and we carved up Germany, and we had this agreement at Yalta. Yalta's right here. That 3 months after the end of fighting in Europe, the Soviets would invade Japanese-occupied Manchuria, which they hadn't the whole time. We had been allied with them, fighting over here, and they were not fighting. They didn't go from here to here, here to here, here to here, here to here. Soviet Union, Japan, Soviet Union, Japan, Soviet Union, Japan. I know you could say United States, Japan, but Soviet Union, Japan. They didn't do it because I mean, it is kind of crazy to ask them to do a two-front war. But it's also kind of crazy to be like, okay, we're teaming up with this war, but not with this one, you know. But it's August of 19. So it's okay. So it's May of 1945, and the Russians are probably coming over because Stalin is generally pretty good at holding up his word in international agreements, especially so far. Um, and it's now May of 1945. How long is this war going to go for? They should have given up 2 years ago. I mean, why are they still fighting? Why do they keep putting out propaganda that it's 100 million Japanese people dying for the emperor? They can't mean that, right? How do you win World War II? Like we've won it on. Uh, there's a couple ways, right? You can wait it out. You can wait for you can wait for France to take back Indochina. You can wait for Britain to take back Malaysia. You can wait for the Dutch to take back Indonesia, and just hope all of the Europeans come back and take back all of their colonies. But that's probably not going to go over well. Um, and also, that's hundreds of thousands of people starving to death every month, which is happening all over this incredibly disrupted economy. Um, you know, do you wait for the Chinese to win it because they're not going to? Oh, then they also do this thing called Operation Ichigo, which is where they stretch themselves really, really thin, trying to connect a railroad through from Vietnam up through Manchuria. And it really exposes them to partisan warfare by the communist guerrilla forces. There's not a lot of battles in this part of the war in China. So there's a couple other ways you can win World War II. The way that we think we're going to do it is invading Tokyo. Why Tokyo? Because there's not that many good places to invade Japan with. The problem with Japan is it's mountains and valleys. That's it. There's mountains, and you can't invade on mountains because it's the wrong angle. And there's also flat plains with good agriculture, and that's where every major city is. And you know where the biggest one is? Tokyo. So the most important, the biggest one, and they're not connected. So that's the best place to invade. And so the Japanese know that's the best place to invade. And so they've been bunkering and hunkering and securing the heck out of it. And so we're thinking we're going to need about 8 million Americans to invade it, and we're going to lose about 2 million American casualties. That's insane. We've lost 400 something thousand so far. Every year the war's gone on, we've lost an order of magnitude more casualties. And everyone has. And this is a war that's killed, you know, 50 to 100 million people at this point. How do you win World War II? How do you stop? So you can invade with ground forces in Tokyo, and that might work. You could lose. It could be that the Japanese beat off the American attack and they have to invade again. Well, you don't know. What if they have some, like, they're serious about making their civilians into a militia the way that nobody else ever has been in the history of the world? So Douglas MacArthur had an idea. Douglas MacArthur's idea was that you don't need to invade at all. We're already starving them. They're already an island. You can bomb them and starve them and bomb them and starve them. And the island, will not be able to do anything about it because it's a set of islands. And, like, what could they do? Like, they'll have to surrender. And even if they don't, we'll be in our boats and in our planes, and they won't be. And we'll just have to carpet bomb them. And we firebomb Tokyo, and firebombing Tokyo. Look, we weren't in charge of what the Japanese made their houses out of, but what they made their houses out of was bamboo and paper. Goes up. And so, 250, 400,000 people are killed firebombing Tokyo. They don't surrender. That's in, like, March of 1945, I think. They don't surrender then. The capital city is burnt to ash. They do not surrender. What would make these guys surrender? You know, is being starved more? You know, maybe, could be. Is it? Do you wait for the Soviets to take, Manchuria and then invade through one half of Japan and then split Japan, just like we're planning to split Korea and split China and split, Vietnam, and you know, do we just have a bunch of half countries all over the place? How do you? And then, so Truman hears about this Trinity test thing, and he goes, "Okay, when are the bombs going to be ready? And you know, when can we drop these? We got a new kind of magic bombs. When can we drop these on Japan?" And they find out that we have two of them, Fat Man and Little Boy. We can drop them on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And he goes, "Yeah, we're going to do it." And he's everyone always everyone always focuses on Oppenheimer because he said that cool thing about the Hindu scriptures. But I mean, Truman did it. We always act like Truman did it, And of course he did it. Is he supposed to not do it? Is he supposed to say, "Guys, I know we're all trying really hard to win World War II, but they're giving us magic bombs, and I'd rather your sons die in the war." He's not gonna. He's gonna try the magic bombs, and he drops a magic bomb. They don't surrender. We told him a bunch of times. We're like, "There's a serious, for real deal bomb coming, and it'll unleash." The way they phrased it was really good. It was like, "Unleash forces never before unleashed by mankind," something like that. And that's just like translated into Japanese and comes down in like a little pamphlet. And you read it in Nagasaki and go, "Eek, I hope they're kidding." Why are they warning us? What kind of weird stuff? They're bluffing. And then it's a bomb that sets everything on fire. That's one of the main things a nuclear bomb does. It obliterates stuff in the middle, stuff on the edges all gets set on fire. The houses in Hiroshima are just as paper as the houses in Tokyo. Whole thing goes up. It was dropped in the Enola Gay. Crazy name. We should have had more. That's one reason you can tell we didn't know we were going to end the war. They would have named it something better. We thought this war was going to go on until 1948 because of how long it would take to amass and train troops to invade the Kanto Plain, which is where Tokyo sits. It's not just the first level of Pokemon. So then the Soviet Union invades Manchuria the day after we dropped the first bomb, and then we dropped the second bomb, and then they surrender. And by they, I mean Hirohito, because there's a war cabinet, and nobody is saying surrender, because everybody is like, "Oh no, we're giving our life for the emperor. We're giving our life for the emperor. We're giving our life for the emperor." And the only person that they can find who's not willing to do that is the emperor, because he has nobody to give his life for. He's like, "What are we talking about? Guys, we're going to run out of Japan, and there won't be any left. How about we still have one?" But the sticking point is unconditional surrender. Does that mean killing the emperor? A lot of the American public wanted to kill the emperor, like a lot, crazy amount, because we didn't get to kill Hitler. Hitler killed himself. But who's the Hitler of Japan? There isn't one. Like the guy who directed them to invade Manchuria in 1931, is that the Hitler of Japan? Because that was some army guy. And is it the guy who invaded China then? Because that's a different army guy. Is it the guy who planned Pearl Harbor? Isoroku Yamamoto? Because he was killed in Saipan in 1943. Is it Admiral Tojo, the prime minister during Pearl Harbor? He's out of office. He's not in office anymore. So is it the emperor? Because he didn't plan any of this, but he technically said okay to it. But he's the one who ended the war? So there isn't one. is the answer. Um, and so they say we're going to surrender, and we'll find a good day to come up with terms. And so the day of the surrender is somewhere like August 11th, around there. I don't know exactly. This is off the top of my head, so I'm not the exact dates. I'm not great at. Uh, and then sometime in September is when they surrendered on the USS Missouri. And in the time between that August, like we're surrendering, and September, we're doing the here's the terms. The Russians take all of Manchuria and North Korea as well. They take that much territory. It's not. It's a lot of space, you know, and they invade all of it. So if they want to give up on the surrender thing, the Russians are now this close to Japan. So they could arguably invade through the south of Japan as well as the north. The Russians could do this whole thing themselves. But the Russians are communists, and the fascists in Japan are afraid of them more because they tend to kill everybody that's fascist in where they take over. And Americans tend to the liberal countries they don't tend to do that. So they're like, let's surrender to America. Let's surrender to America, please. Um, and they send Douglas MacArthur to land on in. They send him on a I think it's like a DC-8 or something. It's like a troop transport plane. It's like a civilian plane, and they send it to land in Tokyo Airport. And it's MacArthur and his guys. And as he's on the plane, about to land in like the capital of kill every American country, Japan, and they snuck up on us and killed us in this war. So their word isn't necessarily like incredibly good because like they have backstabbed us to start this war. So would they do it to end it? Hopefully not. And so like everybody's real nervous, you know. This is still a pretty foreign country. Like it's very foreign in 1945. It's awash in so many other ideas than like what the average American is thinking about. And they just have not. These are cultures that have not had a lot of mixing. So like how much, what even is going on? And MacArthur, who he's always my sunglasses. Oh my god. He's always wearing these sunglasses, and he always forgets something. Anyway, he's always got this cool pipe going, and pipe and a ham and eggs cap and sunglasses. He's an incredible guy, but he's super self-centered, and a lot of people don't like him, but he's the right guy for the job. And so he goes, "Hey guys, listen, before we get off this plane, no pistols." And everyone's like, "What? What? You're gonna shoot him with your pistols?" And they're like, "I'd like to have one, you know." And he's like, no, you guys don't understand these guys. If they see that we come out unarmed, they're gonna be embarrassed to death. And that's the one thing that these guys like the least is being embarrassed, you know. Uh, so let's go out without any pistols on. As his car is getting closer and closer, as his car is like approaching the main building, or whatever, like all of the Japanese soldiers on guard are turning away to face away from the car, and everyone in the car is like, "What is going on? Like, do they hate us? Like, what is this?" And MacArthur's like, "No, no, no, no. They only do this for the emperor. They understand we're in control now." And it's like, you know, okay. Yeah. So Douglas MacArthur, he organizes a bunch of stuff. He organizes the Japanese are to surrender in the name of the emperor on the battleship USS Missouri in Tokyo Harbor, and so they get everybody to go, and everybody who every Marine who is visible to the Japanese delegation on the USS Missouri is at least 6 feet tall. Every one of them is at least 6 feet tall. Uh, just, just, this is a way to height mog the Japanese, I guess. Um, and uh, so he gets them to surrender, and he goes and he sets up office. MacArthur is vested with the power of supreme commander of all forces in the Pacific, so he's in charge of the entire theater. I mean, it's after the war, but like you still have to end the war. You know, it's a big enterprise that you're pulling to a close, and if you screw this one up, it could start a whole half a century worth of conflicts, which it does anyway. But they do a pretty good job of it. So the Vietnamese are surrendered to a Chinese army, which is not good, and the British, they take the surrender at Malaysia, even though they're not supposed to, and you know there's a bunch of stuff that goes on. But MacArthur sets up and starts working. I'm going to start. MacArthur, he sets up and starts working in an insurance building across the street from the emperor's house. Doesn't schedule a meeting with him. Does not schedule a meeting with him. Moves it across the street. Doesn't say anything. The supreme commander of all forces in the Pacific. And what is the emperor worried about? Being hanged. The emperor does not want to give up his life to the emperor because that's him, and he wouldn't be able to appreciate it because he'd be dead. And so he's like, oh man. But also, one of the things about being the emperor in Japan, you don't set meetings. Everyone sets meetings with you. Who would you ask a favor from? I don't know how. And he's tearing him up inside because he's going to be hanged in public until he's dead in front of everybody, which is even more embarrassing than being hanged regular, you know? And and so he's like pacing back and forth, and so he calls MacArthur on the phone. MacArthur knows the psychology of the whole thing. He's just trying to like psychologically dominate the Emperor Hirohito, and he's doing an incredible job. And everyone in America wants to hang Hirohito, and Douglas MacArthur's like, if you want this war to be over, we can't do that. He pushes a lot of this propaganda that he's responsible for the narrative that Hirohito is powerless, basically, which is not really true. But Hirohito found out how much power he had when he surrendered, almost got cooed, got uncooed, and then did surrender. You know, there was a coup after the surrender, and it failed really quickly. Forgot to mention that. But you can there's a really interesting video I'm sure somebody's done about that. Oh yeah, so everyone in Japan is starving to death because we have been starving them to death. We thought we were starving them to surrender, and they were convinced they would rather us have starved them to death. So that's where they were going. Okay, I already preloaded a couple of these. So everyone is starving to death, and he has these ships full of troop rations. And so he goes and he radios command. He says, "Hey, I need a lot more rations to feed all these Japanese people who we have been starving to death." because we don't want them. We want them to be on our side now. And they go, no, that's for the troops. And the Japanese should have worried. They should have surrendered earlier. They didn't want to starve to death. And he goes, listen, you send me rice or you send me bullets. And they go, we're not going to send you any extra food. And so he just radios back like, hey, listen, we're running crazy low on food. I don't know what it is, but you're going to have to send like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times more than you're used to sending. Otherwise, the troops are going to starve. He's just handing out the troop meals to the Japanese. He's having the troops give out candy. You know, these are people that the Japanese people have been told are like insane criminals who killed their parents, and they're handing out candy to kids on the street. And they're like, oh my god. Another thing that so when Hirohito meets with Macarthur, it's basically like a power handover ceremony where it's like, okay, everybody, Douglas is going to be running Japan now by himself, just because we trust Douglas to do that. And there's a word for that, a military leader of Japan who rules on behalf of the emperor. It's a shogun. They call him Gaijin Shogun, foreigner shogun. And he redistributes all the land from the landowner, from the you know how I was saying communism only works when you have all these landowners who own vast tracts of land and basically nobody owns the land. Well, he goes and he says, listen, who's tilling the land? You get the small cut up that you have of it. And so now every farmer in Japan is better off than they were during the war. Every single one. And that does a lot to stabilize politics. What does Douglas MacArthur care if all these nobles lose out on land? Sucks, you know? He also legalizes the Communist Party, which is important because it lets people know how popular the Communist Party is, which is not very. You know, you don't. If you make the Communist Party illegal, they can claim to be the will of the majority. But if you make them legal, you can be like, I guess a lot of these guys are voting Liberal Democratic Party. He makes Emperor Hirohito take a picture with him, and he's short, and Douglas MacArthur's tall, and he looks like shit. You can find the photo. Like Emperor Hirohito is like this. He's like trying to look taller. He's wearing like a fancy London business uniform. He looks like a penguin stretching up. And Douglas MacArthur just like has his tie tucked into his shirt. And he's like not even wearing a jacket. He's just like, hey, it's me, Douglas. I'm in charge now. And and you're not allowed to post a picture of the emperor because it's like posting a picture of the sun. I don't know. The sun and the emperor are related ideas because of Amaterasu or whatever. But you can't post a picture of the emperor because that's not allowed. But guess what? Douglas MacArthur's in charge. We're printing that picture of the emperor in the newspaper, and everyone gets to look at him. But you're not supposed to look at the emperor. He gives every woman suffrage. Based king, he thought it would make them effeminate and weak. We had women's suffrage at the time. What politics is that? I don't know. He's so weird. He writes he tells them to make a constitution. They don't. He tells them they have to make a constitution. They don't. And he gets one, he writes one for them, and he says, you guys wrote this. And they're like, what? And he's like, you guys, tell everybody you guys wrote this. And they're like, okay. And I mean, we know now. It's not like it wasn't an incredibly well-kept secret, but they get credit for it. And it's never been amended. And that's kind of bad. You would want it to be amended if they had to change something. But like we should amend our constitution. You know, like if people really want to get rid of birthright citizenship, I don't. But if people do, pass an amendment. That's the only way to get rid of it. There's no acting like the 14th Amendment does not guarantee birthright citizenship to anybody born in this country. That's what it does. You want to negate it, you have to pass an amendment that negates it. Anyway, so Douglas MacArthur takes what was like the supreme adversary that would never stop fighting the United States in 1945, and by 1950, it's where Americans go to vacation when they're busy fighting in Korea, which is absolutely insane. Okay, let's do a couple more wrap ups because even though the war is over, it's not. Now that China is now freed of Japan, there's no soldiers in all of the major cities of Japan now, which means that the nationalists take all of them over, which means that the nationalists are all overextended, and the nationalists are partnered with the powers that be. They give the land back to the landlords. Everybody hates it. Everybody hate. You're giving the land back to the landlords. You're taking it from the Japanese and you're giving it to the landlords. You're not maintaining the landlord's property. You're giving land back to the landlords. Oh my God, what a bunch of psychos, you know? And you know who's not going to do that is the communists. And because they've been running a country that's been nicer for everybody to live in. And they don't agree with the powers that be. They agree with that we need to do a fundamental revolution to all of China and get rid of all the Confucianism and all kinds of that stuff. So the longer that the Chinese Civil War goes on, the more the communists win. And also, America is done giving China money. Like all of the people that have been sent to work with Chiang Kai-shek hate him, hate him, hate him. They hate him. They hate Chiang Kai-shek. They go, this guy sucks. His wife sucks. His friends suck. Nobody likes him. I can't believe we're partnering with this guy. I'm no communist. We should have partnered with the communists. Their guy is liked way better. You know, Mao Zedong. Mao hasn't made any of his classic big mistakes yet. Mao's doing a good job. Mao won't make any of his classic big mistakes in this video. But yeah, so the Soviets who've taken Manchuria relinquish it to the communists. Manchuria is the most developed part of China, with all the factories. They now have factories. They can now switch from being a guerrilla army on guerrilla warfare, allegedly by Mao Zedong. It's by someone else. I forget who. But it's an incredible book, and it sounds exactly like the Vietnam War and not World War II, which it was written for. But it takes over 1949. Okay, so what's Puyi up to? What's he up to? Remember him? Remember Puyi? He has been in the capital of Manchuria, which is like Harbin or Mukden or whatever, one of those. He's been trapped in his little palace with his opium smoking wife who asked for a divorce, and he was like, sure, which is weird. How is an emperor supposed to? He just grants a divorce. People think he was gay. I don't know the reason for that, but people keep saying it. Okay. So the Chinese take over. I mean, everybody think like the Chinese. Theoretically, the Chinese nationalists beat the Japanese. Like, surely they wouldn't just immediately lose the Civil War to communists who aren't even that popular. They do, because they are actually that popular. And Puyi is boarding. He's like trying to get on a plane as quick as possible, and it's a plane that is bound from Manchuria to Tokyo. He's in the plane. The plane is about to take off, and the Russians storm the guard, not the guard tower, the tower, the radio control tower, and he's not like the first plane in line. So, like as Puyi's about to fly to Japan and surrender with the Americans, the communists pull everybody out of the. They pull every single person out of the jets. No, not jets. The planes that are bound for Japan, and arrest them. And they figure out that he's the emperor of China, and they go, "Okay, we'll put you in a nice palace." And he's like, "Oh man," because the one thing that Puyi does not want to happen is he doesn't want to be hanged to death in front of everybody, because that's embarrassing. Not only are you hanged to death, but it's in front of everybody, which is worse, you know. And also, what did the Russians do to their emperor? They killed him. They shot him in a basement. And so he's really terrified of these communists, you know. He's like, oh God, I don't know if this is a really good idea. you know, are they gonna kill me? Because they killed their own emperor. I'm not even their emperor. These guys are communists, and so they keep him in. And he's like, "Where are you taking me?" And he's like, "Oh, we got this nice hotel, but it's actually gonna be a gilded prison for you." And he's like, "Oh, I've already done like 2 of these. Yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, I've already done a few of these. That's fine." And so they don't even like. They're just like, "Okay, you're being captured here because we want to have you in case you're politically useful to somebody later because you're the emperor." And he's like, "Okay," and he has all his secret jewels on his person because he's convinced he'll never be able to learn a job. He's like a doomer of ever being employed. He's like, "I couldn't learn to do a job. I'm the emperor." And the Soviets are just like, "All right, stay in this nice. There's this nice little town just barely across the Soviet border." Then the communists win the Civil War, and the in China, and the Soviets are like, "What are we doing with the Emperor of China when there's perfectly good communists to babysit this guy over there?" And so they go, "Okay, sure, let's hand him over." And he's like, "Oh no, oh no, oh no, they're gonna hang me because they're communists and I'm the emperor, and that means that we're enemies and we're not gonna be friends. They're gonna hang me." Ah, and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. We're gonna, we're gonna, we're not gonna hang you." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Let me guess. You're gonna put me in a gilded prison where I can have people whipped to death for my entertainment?" And they're like, "No, what? Jesus Christ! No, we're gonna put you in a brainwashing facility." That's the Chinese Communist term. They don't mean anything negative by it. They're trying to wash out the capitalist imperialist propaganda so that your brain is normal, like anybody would be, and accept Mao Zedong thought, which is normal thought. Anyway, what they do is they convince, um, they write self-criticism, which is this Marxist-Leninist idea that Joseph Stalin came up with. I had to look it up. Like, how is Joseph Stalin gonna be the one who comes up with self-criticism? My man did not participate in that sort of field. But basically, he was like, "You guys all should write negative stuff about yourself that I could read." But basically, they make the emperor write like it was not good that I was handed power control over China, and he's like, "But I have the mandate of heaven," and it's like, "Clearly, you don't, buddy. You're in a brainwashing facility. That's not people. That's not something that happens to people who have the mandate of heaven." Uh, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, I guess it was bad that I made all those eunuchs uh, eat all those sandwiches with the BBs in them and shoot. Now, I guess it was bad that that lady had to breastfeed me at all." And then, like, eventually, he like learns how to do laundry. And he learns how to tie his own shoes, and he learns how to, and he's really bad at all of it. And all of his retinue, who's used to like doing all these favors for him, like they're being turned communist, and they're like, "Why am I doing all these favors for this guy? He's just a guy, you know." And 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 he eventually is like pressured into revealing he has these secret jewels, and then he comes forward with all this stuff, and it's like, "Oh gosh, I don't know." And then Mao Zedong writes a letter, and he's you know this is the same guy who in Changsha in like 1911 was like wasn't sure if he was going to cut his queue after the emperor was deposed, and now he's like writing a letter like, and of all of the extra special good prisoners who get released early, and then he went like on one of the names was Hu Yi. He's not going to call him Xuan Tong, He's not going to call him his emperor name. He's not going to call him Henry either. But he's like, "I Sinjoro Pu Yi." Yeah, he gets to go. And so he gets like let out, and you know, and he's like, "Oh, are you guys gonna hang me?" And they're like, "No." And he's like, "Are you guys gonna put me in a prison where I can't go outside and but I can have people whipped to death?" And he's like, "No." It's like, "Can I just ride my bicycle around?" And they're like, "Yeah." And you have to go to work, but yeah, when it's your free time, you can do stuff like that. He's like, Well, wait, really? Yeah, you're not gonna have like a bunch of eunuchs following you around or anything. You can wear glasses and ride a bike and smoke a cigarette. You can do whatever you want. You have to go to work. Like, what do I do? And he's like, you're you're a gardener at the like the National Beijing Botanical Institute. And really, he's the exhibit because Maoism gets to be like, we converted our emperor. You guys had to kill yours. We're the best kind of communism, you know. So he's secretly propaganda, and he writes this incredible memoir that I read called "The Last Manchu" or "From Emperor to Citizen." Anyway, it's ghost written by him and some communist official. Technically speaking, it's communist propaganda, but it's very good. Um, and so that's and then he lives till 1967, and he notices that everybody gets childcare, and he's pretty psyched on that. Um, okay, and the only thing we have left is Lieutenant Onoda is still on Lubang. It's so like 8 months into being on Lubang, it's now August of 1945. And they're playing from speakers like Japan has surrendered. Please come out and stop fighting. Please, we're not going to shoot at you if you come out. And like everybody on the insurgent team is shooting at the source of the speakers until they go away. And then like the next week they come out and it's like, guys, the emperor surrendered. He did it on the radio. Please come out. And everyone in the little unit that Lieutenant Onoda is in is like, the Emperor talked on the radio? These Americans don't do their fucking research. The Emperor doesn't talk on the radio. Jesus Christ. It's like they're not even trying. And then like the the Philippine officials, like the sheriff of Lubang is like, guys, seriously, there's no more, you don't need to, there's no more war to do. We did all of it. It was a lot. We're done now. Please stop murdering the cattle on this island to deny them to the enemy. Those are just like regular people's cows. Like, we can tell you're doing it, but you're very sneaky. Like, please stop. And they're like, these Americans, they're not even. And then there's like a group of them that are like, it kind of seems to me like there's no Americans on this island, and they left. And like, I think that was probably because the war is over, so we're gonna surrender. And Lieutenant Onoda's like, you can't do that. They're gonna kill you. They're gonna torture you and make you say all kinds of crazy stuff that you'd never say. And they're like, are you sure? Because they keep saying warm towels and all you can eat rice. And that kind of appeals to me because it hasn't rained. It hasn't stopped raining for a month and a half. And they said they got all the inside we can take over there. And so I'm going to surrender. And so they surrender. And like 2 weeks later, they hear on the Lieutenant Onoda hears on the loudspeakers like, Lieutenant Onoda, remember me? I forget his name. It's not Kazuka. That's like his best buddy, but it's one of the other ones. He's like, hey, I said surrender, and they would give us hot towels and all you can eat rice. Yeah, there's like showers too. This is like a night. You're treating us nicer than we would treat them. You really got to surrender. The war is totally over. There's a new shogun. His name is Douglas Macarthur, and he smokes a big corncob pipe. And Lieutenant Onoda's like, this isn't even a little bit believable. What happened to 100 million people dying for the emperor? Huh? That guy sounds a little bit like my comrade, but they didn't get the real guy. And eventually, like, everybody's dead except for him and Kazuka, or surrendered. And it's just him and his buddy spending like 28 years together, and it just like goes through like what the yearly schedule is in terms of like, how many cattle do you have to kill in the Philippines. He's still fighting World War II. How many cattle do you have to kill per year? And when you kill a cow, how much of that meat can you actually use for two people? before it just starts to rot because human beings with one fire can only process so much beef um, until it's like not edible anymore. And it rains on this island for like literally 2 months straight. So they have to like construct a shelter like to just hang out in during that whole time. And he gets a radio. Like he gets a radio with a limited battery. He learns how to steal the batteries from around the island. And do you know what he uses the radio for? Sports gambling. He uses the radio for sports gambling. They're leaving out newspapers, and he's like, "This is the CIA. This is the American. This must be a pretty important island for in order for the Americans to make us want to give up, all of this prime real estate. This must be a really important island if they're going to keep delivering all this propaganda." They get his brother to come out and like sing their high school alma mater, and he's like, "Keeping burning deep inside us, that we all really." I don't know. I don't know their alma mater, but those are some lines from my high school's alma mater. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like they're, and it's like, nice try, but my brother wouldn't tear up right at the end of the song. He's a brave guy, and like, turns out he was sad that his brother still like, because they found all the dog tags from all the people who are dead, and so they know who's on the island, and they're like, it's Kazuka and Onoda, and they're like, "Lieutenant Onoda, Lieutenant, Corporal Kazuka, please come out. Please stop sports gambling over chores in the woods, and please return to Japanese society. I cannot stress enough to you how much it is the 1960s, and it is not World War II anymore." And then like he like turns the radio to like the news, and he hears about the Americans are like stuck in Japan in Vietnam, and like they're not making any progress fighting in Vietnam. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, the Americans are fighting in Vietnam. They're taking it from us, the Japanese. And like, he's kind of right in that the Vietnamese are certainly still fighting World War II. Like, they're still fighting for independence of their country, just like they were during World War II and since, straight through. But he's also fighting. But so like he's like Bigfoot. He murders people and cows year after year after year. He has working grenades, working. He's got these details. He wrote a memoir too. He's got these details like ways that you keep a wooden rifle working in wet conditions for 30 years at a time. It's hard. It doesn't seem easy. And he's just getting more and more conspiratorial. He thinks that the Pacific War, because it was so intense when he started, he's like, clearly neither country can afford to be fighting this full time. So they're probably only fighting it on the periphery, and they've left America and Japan to run their own economies, which is like, I guess, He's like, I think we probably, looks like the communists won in China, but I guess we teamed up with them because they're doing trade between China and Japan. So, like, he's just choosing what to believe and what not to believe from the newspapers that they keep leaving out for him, and like the news reports that he thinks are being broadcast for his behalf. And so he's like famous in Japan as like the guy still fighting. And like every time they find a murdered cow with World War II bullets in it, they go, "Oh, he's still around, Lieutenant Onoda." And then in like 1972, they find dog tags that say Kazuka because one of the police officers he was murdered his friend right back. Like just regional, just cops, not like anybody important, just like guys who are making sure nobody's drunk driving on Lubang. And he's like stealing their clothes to mend his clothes. And he's noticing they have like nicer clothes. The economy's picking up around here. you know. And there's this guy. It's like wacky. He's like a wacky, rich, world traveling Japanese personality. Um, oh, I forget his name, but he's he makes a big show of like, I'm going to go to Lubang to find Lieutenant Onoda or Bigfoot, whoever's first. Woo! And he's got like an ascot, and he's like a wacky 1960s guy. You know, he's a little guy, and you know, he's certainly more effeminate than a guy who has been fighting World War II for 30 years. Um, and he like the first day he sets up camp in in uh, on Lubang, he's just like he's doing no stealth techniques because he doesn't know how. You know, there's all these ways you can camp that will make you like invisible unless somebody really knows what they're looking for. He's like setting up a big purple tent in the middle of a clearing with a fire at night. You know, like you're trying to be spotted by aircraft, and like he's like zipping up the tent, and he hears in Japanese like, "Hey, put your hands up," and then like he says back like, "Hold on, are you Lieutenant Onoda?" He's like, "How do you know my name?" He's like, "You're the only guy speaking Japanese on this island. You know, like it's me and you. Like you're famous. You know that?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? Like you're famous in Japan." He's like, "For what? I haven't even seen much action. I just picked up a couple gum wrappers and shot a couple Americans and like many cows and police officers and people doing laundry and stuff." And he's like, "No. Oh yeah, the war is over. The war is done. And buddy, calm down. Oh, by the way, stop pointing the gun at me, please. Uh, you know, please stop. That's really unnerving, and we're both Japanese. I'm not. Come on, you can put the gun down. Just sit down." And they talk for like 2 hours, and at first, I was like, no, this is all made up. And at a certain point, I forget the guy's name, but he's just like, let me talk. Just let me talk to you. Just don't push back on the stuff I say, okay? You can not believe it, but just let me okay. And he tells the whole thing, and then when you get to the end of a good conversation, you go, "Oh well, we've had a good talk, and I'm sure you want to go back to civilization again and see. There's TV now. Would you like to see what TV they can do? Pictures over the air, and that's like radio, but for your face. And you've been on it, and you haven't even seen it because we have your photo." Um, and he's like, "Oh no, I can't. I have to get my commanding officer to surrender to." And I'm like, "What? I came all the way out here, and it's worth nothing to you?" He's like, "I mean, I'm under orders, man. It's wartime." And he's like, "Oh my god, I can't think. Okay. I'm gonna come back here in 1 month time, 30 days. 30 days. You can count that, right?" He's like, "Yeah, I can do that. Like, I'll be here with your commanding officer wherever the hell he is." And he's like, "All right, and when I bring him here, you'll surrender to him if he says what I tell you he's gonna say." He's like, "Yes." He's not going to. We're at war. He's like, That's fine. But if all this stuff happens, you will stop being at war with these Filipino cows and police officers." And he's like, "Yes, yeah. I mean, if you can somehow, he's probably busy doing war stuff." Anyway, they go to this bookshop where like there's this guy stacking books, and they open the wrong way because they're Japanese, but they're like regular books because they have information and stuff. And so he's like putting up the books, and and the guy, that wacky 1960s personality guy who's somewhat famous comes in, and he's like, "Oh my god," and he's like, "Hey, Lieutenant Onoda?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I serve with him. I don't know. I mean," and he's like, "No, like he asked for you." And I was like, "What?" Like, "Yeah, we met, we talked, and he needs you to be there while he surrenders to you." And he's like, I'm doing books." And I'm like, "Yeah, but he's doing World War II, and he has to stop." And so he, um, yeah, he goes. So yeah, they fly him. They fly him down to the Philippines, which is like far. Uh, and like he's wearing civilian clothes, and like find like he's poorly fitting. Like he's fatter now because it's 30 years later, 29 years later. Um, and like he doesn't fit into his military uniform, and like he's like you know wearing flip flops because he doesn't know where his boots are. I don't know if this is all. I'm adding details, but he's like, and like he goes to the place, and like Lieutenant Onoda is like crouched down, like peering through his sight, like, yeah, that looks like my commanding officer. But this could be another ruse, like that guy who almost sounded like my brother, except he cried. And then like he says all the right phrases, and the guy's like, I'm surrendering. He's like, yeah, yeah, World War II's over. Okay. Are they gonna put me to death? And he's like, I don't think so, buddy. And then like he goes and he gets a picture taken with all of the sheriff's department because they like didn't know if he was real. They were pretty sure he was real, but like, I mean, what he could be a band of drug smugglers. He could. I mean, did this guy He's been hunting you, and you've been hunting him for decades, and now he's just like here, and you can shake his hand. They take a picture with him, and he's like, I can't believe I'm not being hung for all the terrorism I did against you guys. And they're like, no, you're more of like a silly public interest because you mostly killed cows. Um, and he burned a lot of rice as well to deny it to the enemy, the farming people of Lubang. And then he gets on a plane, and they make him take a photo where he's like this, but he's wearing like the shirt that he's like patched together 8 million times. And then then he gets back on a plane, and that's the end of World War II. You know, and uh, thank you so much for watching. I am gonna. If you want to support, please feel free to go to my website, chrisoveralls.com, and get my board game, Three Kingdoms Hold'em. And I promise I'm autistic. Okay, this was not faked, not on steroids. I just like the world. I just like the World War II in the Pacific is cool, because it's huge, and you never get to hear enough about it. It's always Europe, 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 because we're not friends with the Chinese no more. We're still friends with people, and the whole time they took 80% of the Japanese army was in China. We were only fighting 20% of it. 80% of the Japanese army was in China, just murdering people. And anyway, but yeah, if you want to support, it's a cool game. And my Instagram, I got T-shirts at bonfire.com. It's on my website. My website is chrisoveralls.com. You can find everything there. You can follow me on Instagram at chrisoveralls911. Post silly reels, and TikTok at chrisoveralls. All right, and that's World War II in the Pacific, and it only took us three hours and change. All right. I hope people click on this. Stop going live. End.